Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Is respect something that should automatically be given, or is it something that has to be earned? Couldn't this question also be applied to loyalty? Can you be loyal to the home you were born in, even when the home has no love for you? This is what Naruto finds himself asking himself every day. Where does his loyalty lie, and who can he respect? Especially when he has been hindered for something he had nothing to do with. It was another day at the academy with all the students going through the same things as before. Naruko was droning on about the history of the shinobi, going over the same event he had done who knows how many times in the last year. Mizuki was shuffling through the papers that he had collected earlier, and the students were doing their best to make it look like they were paying attention. This is what Naruto was going through as he sat at the back of the class. But he wasn't even trying to make it look like he cared about the lecture. He was looking out the window as he thought to himself about what he was going to do when the day was over. Naruto. Pay attention. Arg. Naruto felt something small hit the side of his head, hard, and he rubbed the spot before looking at the front of the class, while everyone started laughing. Naruto gave a disapproving look at his student. I know you aren't the best in class, but you could at least try to make it look like you are putting in the effort. Naruto glared at the man before he grabbed the chalk and tossed it back at him. Not really trying to hit the man, just giving it back since he didn't want the man to come get it back. His eyes scanned the still laughing classmates before his eyes landed on one in particular. They kept eye contact for a few seconds before he turned away from the smiling face that looked up at him and continued to gaze out the window. Why the hell am I even here? Honestly, he knew that he might have enjoyed the academy a bit more if it wasn't for the way he was treated. Not really from the other academy students, since he could say that some of them were decent, but more so the teachers. Naruto still holds himself as a teacher and tries his best to make sure that everything he teaches reaches all of his students. However, it is clear that he focuses more on the other students than on him despite how he has low marks in the class. That doesn't mean that he has the lowest, but with how he is seen, he might as well drop out of the academy. Okay, everyone, now that we finished today's lecture, we will be going outside to evaluate your taijutsu skills. With the graduation exam coming up soon, we want to make sure that you have what is needed in order to be genin. This got the rest of the class excited as it was the best part of the academy. The lecturing was interesting the first year, but after listening to the man drone on, they became boring really fast. Naruto sighed at how excited the class became, but it was to be expected. Alright, everyone, let's all head to the field. Naruto got up from his seat and waited for the rest of the class to leave before he followed them to the field. He had an idea on how things would turn out during this part of the class, but after years of it, he had gotten used to it. Or at least, he wishes he could say that. Naruto sat away from the rest of the class as he watched how the other students handled their opponents. Most of them were civilians, so they didn't really have that much in the way of training. However, this class was special in a sense since it held all of the clan heirs and heiresses. There was one civilian who could be considered noticeable, Sakura Haruno. In terms of taijutsu and knowledge, she is the best out of the civilians but much weaker than all of the clan heirs and heiresses. She stands out thanks to her long pink hair and red quipao, but apart from that, there was nothing else. Naruto didn't interact with her since when she is angry, she knows how to make a hit hurt and won't stop till she feels better or the one that made her mad is unconscious. Kiba Inuzuka, heir to the Inuzuka clan and his ninkin partner Akamaru. Kiba is a slightly arrogant hothead who likes to boast about his skill and his abilities. Even when he is humbled, he still acts arrogant. Naruto stays away from Kiba as the arrogant mutt has the habit of demeaning anyone who loses, even if they don't lose to him. Shino Aburame, heir to the Aburame clan. He is a very quiet individual who keeps mostly to himself, but if he has something to say, it would be a good idea to listen. He is one of the smartest ones in the class but is very reserved, and it's rare for him to say anything to anyone other than his friends. Naruto was okay with Shino, but that's because the Aburame gave him no reason to see him in a negative manner. Hinata Hyuga, heiress of the Hyuga clan, wielders of the Kekkei Genkai, Byakugan. One of the very few decent Hyuga. She is a kind-hearted soft-spoken girl that would make sure you're okay before she considers her own well-being. Despite how the rest of the clan are, she is the odd one out and often seen as the black sheep. She has the dream of merging both the branch and main family into one, but the elders see this as a traitorous thought as they seem fine with their high throne where they can use their own family as slaves. There was even a rumor that they planned to marry Hinata off to one of their flunkies and then brand the gentle girl with their branch seal. Naruto thought the girl had a noble but difficult goal, however, she has few who would stand by her to make sure that she wasn't beaten down. Shikamaru Nara, heir of the Nara clan. Smartest and laziest one in the class. Like many of the Nara men, he prefers to take naps rather than do anything else that they might find troublesome. But what they lack in motivation, they make up for in strategic intelligence. Give them any form of information about your abilities and they can think up strategies to subdue you. Naruto didn't have any real opinion about Shikamaru as they hardly interacted. However, he supposed he could give the Nara some positive points for not being smug about his advantages. Choji Akamichi, heir of the Akamichi clan. Want to find someone who had the strength to punch down trees but wouldn't hurt a fly? Look no further than Choji. Guy has a heart of gold and is a great friend. Don't call him fat, though. You'll regret saying it, and the broken bones you'll get. Naruto had a few good interactions with the Akamichi but only a little to really consider him a friend. Ino Yamanaka, heir to the Yamanaka clan and gossip queen of the class. A girl that has a weird knack for getting information. If something juicy is in the wind, you can be sure that Ino knows it and is going to spread the news. And if you have a secret you don't want to get out, she is able to find out and consider spreading it or not. Naruto didn't really like how Ino would spread out rumors as there are times she does it without considering the ramifications of them. There was a time when she spread a rumor about him that had little to no backing. Safe to say, he was not friendly towards her or her slightly snooty attitude. Sasuke Uchiha, heir of the Uchiha clan. Arrogant is a word you could use to describe the Uchiha. Thanks to how he was raised thinking that the Sharingan is the ultimate dojutsu, he has this idea that he is superior to the other students, at least, that was until the idea was beaten out of his head by another. He learned that despite how useful the dojutsu is, it is like any other shinobi tool. It has its uses but it is not unbeatable. Some tactics make the dojutsu useless and using it too much can cause problems later on. After learning this lesson, he began to use it sparingly so as not to depend on it too much. It's a lesson he still hasn't gotten fully but it's nice to know that he isn't using it as a crutch. Naruto kept his distance from the Uchiha as there was another that made it their job to antagonize him. Someone that he has more of an issue with. He watched as each of them went up against either one of the civilians or another heir. When up against a civilian, it ended quickly. When up against another heir, the fight was cool to watch. He sighed as he knew that his time was almost coming up and it was up against the one he had the biggest issue with. The one he had the biggest problem with was Naruko Namikaze versus Naruto Namikaze. The call from Iruka snapped him out of his thoughts before he made it to the arena, to fight his sister. Naruko Namikaze. She was a very hyper girl who seemed to smile at almost everything. Top of the class in terms of taijutsu and ninjutsu. Not the brightest but she could pass with the prior mentioned skills alone. Not that she would even need to try since almost everyone in the academy adores her. The teachers always praised her, spent extra time with her if she needed help, and practically gave her everything she needed. She had long blonde hair that was set up in pigtails and bangs framing her face, striking blue eyes, and 3 whisker marks on each side of her cheeks. She was wearing her usual outfit of a loose white shirt that cut off short showing off her midriff, an open solid orange jacket that had the Uzumaki swirl on its back, a durable orange pants that had a white streak going up both sides of her legs, and blue shinobi sandals. Her weapons pouch was attached to the back of her pants and her kunai pouch was wrapped around her right leg. The weapons she had were high quality and at a lower price since everyone in the village practically treated her as a princess. In contrast, he was the outcast. The one the teachers would have preferred was dropped out of the academy and never became a shinobi. They had taught him poor stances, held out on information on tips needed for required jutsu, and didn't even try to correct him in terms of his weapons usage. He was wearing a loose black shirt that had orange lining on the sleeves, dark blue pants, and blue shinobi sandals. He had spiky hair the same color as Naruko, the same colored eyes, and the same whisker marks on his cheeks. The reason for the difference in treatment, even though they were siblings, was a well-kept secret. At least to those that didn't need to know. Naruto though, ready to lose again. Naruto. Gonna give up this time. Naruko crossed her arms as she gave a smirk, almost as if looking down at him. Naruto looked at his sister, doing his best not to glare as he got into his stance. Do you need to ask that every time we fight? His stance was that of the academy-style taijutsu. Naruko shrugged as she had a smirk on her face. Well, you always lose when we fight, so I figure it would be something I think I should always ask. She lowered herself to be in a fighting style that she was taught. The hummingbird style. 1. Iruka looked at the two before he brought his hand up. Ready. Begin. He dropped his hand, signaling for the two to start. Naruko charged at Naruto at speeds that many of the academy students thought to be fast. She was in a low position as she got to her brother before she threw her palm up toward his chin. Naruto jumped back to avoid the attack before he bounced back at his sister and threw a roundhouse at her as she stood up. Naruko vaulted over Naruto's leg with a happy smirk on her face before spinning in the air and bringing her foot into Naruto's face. Naruto spun from the force of the kick and tried to rebalance himself, but he felt another kick hit him in the chest and sent him rolling on the ground. He quickly pushed himself off the ground and brought his arms up to block another kick to his face as Naruko didn't let up on her assault. The force of the kick caused him to skid back and give him enough room to counter. However, Naruko appeared in front of him and landed an uppercut to his chin, completely bypassing his defense. He crashed into the ground and was about to get back up, till he felt a foot on his chest, keeping him down. Iruka saw this and lifted his hand. Enough. Winner. Naruko Namikaze. The rest of the class cheered for Naruko with some of the clan heirs making small comments to each other. Kiba laughed at Naruto as he held his stomach. Ha 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 ha, man, that was one hell of a beatdown. Shikamaru sighed as he looked at Kiba. Not like you could do any better. If I recall, you couldn't even last a minute against her. Kiba stopped laughing as he crossed his arms. Humph, not like Naruto could do any better. Sasuke sighed as he turned away from the sight. He lasted longer than last time, but the end result is how it always is. Shoji gestured to the two. I still don't get why there is such a difference between the two. Shouldn't they be at the same level since they live together and all that? Shikamaru patted Choji on the shoulder. I'm sure there is some reason for it. Maybe Naruto just doesn't train as hard as she does. Ino shrugged uncaringly. Whatever the reason, there is no way Naruto could win against her with how he is in class. Sakura nodded in agreement. All he does is sit in the back and not pay attention to the lesson. It's his own fault. Naruko took her foot off Naruto as she crossed her arms. I told you that you should have given up. Naruto didn't stop his glare from showing as he got up from the ground. Yeah, and you know everything, don't you? The harsh tone almost made her flinch, but she just huffed and turned away. Why are you even here in the academy? You should just give up and do something else with your life. Naruto grit his teeth but chose to just walk past her. Like you know anything. Naruko grew angry at how he was just brushing her off. Hey, you should listen to your older sister when she is talking to you. Naruto didn't even turn around as he continued walking. When you have something worthwhile, maybe then I'll consider listening to you. He didn't even bother staying for what the instructors would say. Iruka noticed this and called out, Naruto, don't you want to stay and listen to the evaluation? Are you actually going to tell me or just say that I did poorly and that I should get better at the academy style taijutsu so that I can have a chance against the hummingbird style? He stopped and turned to look Iruka in the eyes, putting emphasis on the styles, daring the instructor to actually say that. Iruka winced at his response since that was what he was planning on telling the boy. Even he knew that anyone using the academy-style taijutsu would have no chance against someone who uses a style that allows speed and precise strikes to dominate the opponent. Naruto nodded as he figured that was the case. He walked back into the academy, hoping for the day to end. Later, the academy ended and all the students rushed out in order to head home or meet up with family. Naruto walked out of the academy and saw all the other students greeting family before they left. He noticed that Sasuke was greeting his older brother Itachi, who did their brotherly forehead poke. He stood at the gate for a second watching that before he turned and left. However, he paused when he saw that his sister was ahead of him, walking home. He sighed in defeat as he began to walk in the same direction as her. Naruko was thinking back on the day with a few thoughts rushing through her head. The day had started out really well, but after the fight, she lost a lot of motivation. The harsh way Naruto had spoken to her soured her mood and she was really angry with how he just brushed her off. Her thoughts were on this as she was walking home, but after a couple minutes, she felt his presence behind her. She knew it was him cause they lived in the same building. She frowned as she was trying to think of a comeback to what he said earlier. She was his older sister and she had the right to tell him what he needed to know. For about 10 minutes, the two continued to walk home with a 20-foot distance between each other. Not wanting to keep this up, Naruko spun around to say something to him, but when she did, he was gone. Turning back around, she saw that he was now roof-hopping home. Growling at how he got a head start, she jumped to the roof to go after him. Naruto had gotten tired of seeing his sister's back and decided that he should just get things moving, which is why he began to roof hop. It didn't take long till he saw his sister bypass him and move faster home. He frowned at that and thought about whether he should just walk home and let her just keep going. But when he looked down, he scowled at the people that were walking on the street. It's not worth it. He continued his travels as a few of the villagers noticed him and scowled. The two continued to roof hop home with Naruko landing first, with Naruto landing a few seconds later. Naruko gave a smirk as she crossed her arms under her bust. I win. Naruto sighed before he walked past her to the front door. Naruko took that as a victory and followed him. Naruto opened the door with Naruko shouting, "We're home." Coming out of the kitchen was a woman with long red hair, wearing a green apron over a white short-sleeved shirt and gray pants. Welcome back. She walked up to them and hugged Naruko tightly. Naruto didn't even stay there as he walked past them and up the stairs. Kushina looked over her shoulder at the departing male of her twins and frowned. She let out a deep sigh at the sight before she was brought back to her daughter as the young girl spoke. Hey, Mom, are we gonna get some more training done? Kushina looked down at her daughter and nodded. Yes, we are gonna get back to training you. We still have to get more practice done with Fuinjutsu and attempt to get our Kekkei Genkei out. Naruko frowned as she didn't like doing those. She was no good at either of them. She just couldn't get the calligraphy right, and not once has she ever gotten the chains to appear. Do we have to? Kushina sighed before bonking her daughter on the head. Of course. You want to be the best kunoichi out there, right? Seeing her daughter nod, she elaborated. Well then, we have to train hard in order for you to get as much advantage as possible. But for that, we will have to wait for. I'm home. Kushina and Naruko looked to the door to see Minato Namikaze. Dad. Naruko ran to her father and hugged him tightly. Minato chuckled as he patted his daughter on the head. Easy, you make it seem like you haven't seen me in months. Naruko looked up with a big grin on her face. Nah, I'm just making sure you aren't a shadow clone. Minato shook his head. No, I left a shadow clone in the office to go over the papers that came to my desk. Kushina walked up to him and gave the man a kiss. You sure the old bats aren't gonna be mad at you? Minato shrugged. They probably won't notice it. Maybe. The two females laughed at that before they moved to the living room. Kushina looked to Minato and asked, so are we gonna work on some things now or after dinner? Minato thought about it before. He figured that they could get some things done before dinner and get to the heavier stuff later. Telling this to the two, his daughter asked, are Pervy Sage and Kakashi going to show up today? Minato shook his head. Not Jiraiya. He is out on a mission at the moment and won't be back for another couple of days. Kakashi though said that he would pop in to teach you some more jutsu. He wants to make sure that you get more practice with the last fire jutsu you learned before he moves on to something else. Naruko nodded before he brought his hands up. Oh, we had another sparring session during the academy. Minato tilted his head as he asked. Oh, who did you face? I fought against Naruto. There was a pause between the adults before Kushina asked. Well, how did it go? Naruko gave a big toothy grin as she brought up her victory sign. I won easily. Minato let out a sigh before smiling at her. Well, I guess that makes sense. Naruko's smile dropped before she tilted her head in confusion as she asked her father. Dad, why won't you train Naruto? You always give me training but I never saw you train him. He would at least be a challenge if he was better skilled, so why? Minato took in a breath before he knelt down to be more at her eye level. Naruko, he doesn't have the skill or capability that you do. We have tried to teach him some of the things we know, but not once has he ever been able to get a grasp on any of what we tried. We do help him out from time to time, but he doesn't seem to appreciate what we tell him. That is why we are putting more effort into your training. He pressed his finger onto her chest as he smiled at his daughter. You have the potential to become the greatest kunoichi ever. You want that, right? Naruko nodded. Then we should get to training so you can make it. Naruko smiled as she pumped her fists in the air. Yeah. Unseen by the others, Naruto was leaning against the wall at the top of the stairs. He scowled downstairs before he made his way to his room, making sure that he didn't make any noise to signal that he was listening. He entered and sat cross-legged on his bed, with the window behind him. He couldn't help but scoff at what his father told Naruko, and how Naruko just seemed to eat it up as if it was the genuine truth. Minato and Kushina had not once taught him anything. And if he were to be honest, he didn't want them to train him. Especially with their reasoning and what they go through for him. That is also why he has a big issue with his sister. She gained this idea that she is better than anyone else in the class, but for some reason, she tends to look down at her like he was nothing. She enjoys beating him into the ground, she rubs her accomplishments into his face, and she never even bothers to act like a sister to him. It wasn't always like that though. There was a time where they were close, almost inseparable. Flashback. A young 4-year-old Naruto poked his head over the couch of the living room as his eyes scanned left and right for his pursuer. Not seeing any sign of movement, he pulled himself over the back of the couch before trying to lower himself on the other side. He hung off the back with his legs kicking a few times before he dropped to the ground. Oof. He landed on his butt before he got up and looked around in case he was caught. Suddenly from under the couch, another young blonde came out and tackled him. Got ya! Naruto yelped in shock as the two rolled on the ground. Before he got a chance to do anything, he began laughing at being tickled by the one who tackled him. Ha 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 ha. Okay, I give. You win. Coming off the boy was Naruko as she gave a big toothy smile. I win again. Once she said that she was tackled by her brother and began to laugh as he tickled her back. The two rolled around on the ground as they began to tickle each other in payback. After a few minutes, the two stopped as they laid on the ground and panting hard. Naruto lifted his arms as he gave a victory sign. I win. No, I win, was Naruko's counter-argument. Nah, I win. 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 Naruto jumped onto his sister, causing them to roll on the ground again. Naruko was about to push him off but suddenly felt him press his face on her cheek and blow, causing a raspberry sound. Ah! She pushed him off before she did the same thing by blowing onto his cheek. It became a battle of who could do raspberries on each other the most, with the two rolling around the whole floor. After another childish argument on who won that time, they chose to let it be a draw. Naruko got up from the ground before she got a bright idea. Wanna try something else? Naruto lifted his head to look at Naruko. What? Wanna try that cool thing mom and dad do? Naruto tilted his head as he didn't know what she was talking about. Getting up, he asked. What thing? Naruko frowned at her brother before she pointed out the window. That thing they do when they swing their arms at each other and jump around and do all those funny things with their hands. Naruto had to think about it for a second before he realized what she was referring to. He pumped his arms in the air in excitement. Oh yeah. The two then moved to their own side of the room before they gave a childish battle cry and ran at each other. Naruto came out of his thoughts as he heard a noise coming from outside through his window. He looked over his shoulder to see the other three outside. He listened to what they were saying as they were starting their training. Naruko groaned as her mother said they would start by trying to unlock the Uzumaki chains. Do we have to start with that? I never get it, and in the end, all I do is sit there. Kushina sighed as she sat down on the ground. If we don't try it now, we won't get the chance later on since you will be busy with your father and Kakashi. Who knows, you might be able to get it this time. Naruko grumbled as she sat down. Yeah, right. Now, let's start by focusing on your chakra flow. I know you have trouble with your chakra, thanks to your tenant, but channel chakra into your back. You remember that the back of a person has several chakra points, making it easier for us to manifest the chains. She summoned a chain from her back as a demonstration for her daughter so she understood what she had to do in the end result. By focusing on one of those points, the Uzumaki bloodline manifests in chains that are incredibly useful. Once you get the hang of bringing one out of those points, you can learn to bring them out from other parts of your body. Naruko rolled her eyes. Yeah, I know, Mom, you tell me this every time we practice. She closed her eyes in order to focus her chakra on her back. Minato smirked as he saw his daughter try to bring out her mother's bloodline. When you finish with that, we can work on the Rasengan. Naruko grew excited at that prospect as she had wanted to learn that jutsu for forever. She turned her body to look behind her at her father. Alright, you better teach me. Not like pervy sage saying he would teach me if I showed him some pervy pictures. Kushina gained a tick mark as she gave a strained smile to Minato that clearly promised pain. Remind me to talk to Jiraiya when he arrives. Minato gave a nervous chuckle at the look his wife was giving him. Naruko gained a glint in her eyes as she gained a small victorious pranking smile. Heh. Her eyes landed on the window that was for her brother's room, causing her smile to fall. She sighed before she turned back ahead and tried to meditate, with much less enthusiasm. Naruto moved to stand in the middle of his room. There was plenty of space since he had very little in terms of personal items. He had the basic necessities but nothing more to really call his own. Not cause he didn't want anything but more because he wasn't given an allowance or any more to buy his own things. Choosing to focus on other things, he brought his hand up with his palm facing the ceiling. He took a breath and focused on his chakra. Clink clink. Coming out of his palm was a golden chain that moved like a snake before it dropped down and dangled in his hand. He gripped the chain before he used his other hand to pull it like he was pulling out more of it from his hand. He held it horizontally in front of him and smirked at his progress. He knew that he never wanted to be trained by his parents, but that didn't mean that he wasn't going to learn their techniques on his own. A way to get back at them after what they did to him, what they were doing to him, and what they could be planning to do with him. His mind went back to the moment that everything changed. When they stopped being family. Flashback. Naruto was running through the halls of the Hokage Manor, excitement clear on his face. He was going to ask his father if he could get some training ahead of time. He knew that he and Naruko were going to be trained at the same time since his dad told them it would help keep them both at the same level. But Naruto's excitement got him wanting to start already, and it would help him get ahead of his sister, at least a little bit, since she was having a sleepover with some of her friends. Not only that, but he felt that if he became strong enough, he could help his sister in case she ever needed it. She had told him before, she was the Jinjiki or something of some large demon fox. When he heard that, he told her that he would still help her if it ever caused her trouble. She didn't need to deal with it alone, they were siblings after all. If he was strong enough, he could protect her. As he got closer to the Hokage office, he chose to slow down and gained a cheeky smirk. He began to tiptoe toward the door as he thought that surprising his dad would be fun. He pressed himself on the wall and shuffled closer to the door. Soon, he began to hear voices coming from the room and got curious about what it was they were saying. Closer he got to the room till the voice became clear. And that's what I think we should be doing now. Focus on Naruko's training so that she could fulfill the prophecy with no issue. Naruto recognized the voice to be Pervy Sage's. He smiled wider as he always thought the man was funny with all his weird dances and toads. He stifled his laughter as he thought that it would be fun to surprise the man along with his father. Minato sat in his seat as he thought about what his sensei had told him. He trusted the man, but this wasn't the first time Jiraiya thought that someone was the destined one from the old toad's prophecy. Jiraiya, are you absolutely sure that she is the one that the prophecy speaks of? Let's not forget who you thought it was before. Jiraiya sighed as he crossed his arms. I know I jumped the gun last time, but who else could it be? She holds the Kyuubi, which matches the part of the prophecy. One born of the leaf who holds the burden that could affect the world will either bring it peace or light the flames to its destruction. That sounds too ominous for a prophecy of peace, Pervy Sage. Naruto was surprised to hear his mother's voice too. And the conversation sounded so heavy that he stopped his advance and just stood there against the wall. He heard Jiraiya sigh before continuing from here. I don't make these up, I just hear them. But can you deny that it sounds like she fits the prophecy accurately? He saw that the two were truly considering what he was saying and were agreeing with him on that. There is also the part of the prophecy that has me worried. It says, this being will withstand the hardships within the tree of its birth and face the dark tree from beyond and within the home of all. He took a heavy breath as he looked seriously at the two. If I had to guess, there is something within Konoha that will cause trouble for her. And then there is the other part. The mirror image of the chosen one will stand between the chosen and the choice. Minato didn't like the sound of that last part and had to ask. What does that last part mean? The tension in the room was heavy, and even Naruto felt the tension from the hallway before Jiraiya gave his thoughts on it. I believe it means that Naruto might stop Naruko from achieving the peace she could bring. He is the mirror image of Naruko, seeing how he is her twin. The room was silent for a few moments till Kushina asked, what does that mean for Naruto? Jiraiya looked grim before he spoke. I think it means that Naruto is going to be a problem. Choosing to not beat around the bush, he brought up his idea. So I think we should do what we can to avoid that. No training, and you should hold him back as much as possible without making it seem obvious. The statement caused the other two to pause at his statement. Minato thought about what Jiraiya said and how this would affect Naruto. But if what the man said was true, it could be beneficial in the long run for everyone. He sat there for a few minutes in heavy thought till he finally came to a conclusion. All right. Naruto's eyes widened hearing his father agree with him. He couldn't believe that Jiraiya would bring up the idea of holding him back and not training him in any manner. And then there was his father agreeing with it, and not a word of protest from his mother. Flashback end. He may have been 5 at the time, but he understood that they were seeing him as a threat to a plan that he had no clue of. They were going to try and keep him weak and hinder him as much as they could. And they have been doing it ever since. Not only that, Minato had made others do the same to him, including the instructors of the academy. That is why they tend to try and sabotage him every chance they get. From giving him tests that have a genjutsu over them to show different questions, teaching him poor forms, and pitting him against people they knew were better than him in taijutsu. Then there was the cascading result of such things. Naruto doesn't know how it got to this point, but for some reason, the villagers began to treat him as if he were a plague. They would spit in his direction, sneer at him, and would throw things at him if they could. Naruko was soon influenced by the treatment he was given and began to look down at him. Everything he did was like something she felt she needed to scoff at. She gained this haughty attitude anytime she was around him and only him. It was like she thought that he was nothing but a punching bag, a stepping stone for her to get to where she wanted to be, and never defended him when he needed it. In fact, she became one of the many who would make fun of him when he was around. Naruto didn't know if she was even aware of the prophecy, but they stopped being as close as they used to be. The biggest thing that pissed him off was that his father had set up a few Anbu to watch him and make sure that he doesn't do anything that could be considered improving too much. If they see him doing some intense training, they would drop their Anbu appearance and have one of them come in as a Chunin or Jonin and tell him that he can't be training where he was. There were even some times they would launch a jutsu in his direction, telling him that he shouldn't be anywhere near there so that he wouldn't get hurt by their own training. They didn't keep an eye on him when he was at home since Minato was there. So he did small practice in his room, where he wouldn't be disturbed. It's why he was able to do what he could do, and he was going to keep it a secret for now till he had a bit more freedom. He practiced his chakra sensing ability early on, which is why he was able to tell that he was being followed by Anbu. He was able to use the chakra chains that his mother was trying to teach Naruko by listening to his mother's description. He was even working on some other skills that he knew would help him in the future, all of which he had gathered in secret. Which was difficult with the Anbu keeping track of wherever he went. This was how he was improving, by doing it in secret, and he was going to keep it a secret till the time was right. And that time was coming soon. He can wait a little bit longer. He waited for years for this, and it was so close now. He will gain his freedom. Even if he has to fight for it. Blue eyes opened as the sun peeked in through the window, ready to wake all those to a bright new day. The owner of the eyes groaned before she rolled over and buried her face into the bed as she brought a pillow to cover her head. The birds began to wake up as well as they started their morning routine of chirping their good mornings to all those still trying to get some more sleep. Groa, and alright already. She turned back to lay on her back before sitting up. Stupid birds. Stupid sun. She threw off her blanket and got up before glaring at the window. One day, I will destroy the sun. She trudged to her closet before opening it and grabbing another set of clothes. She left her room and walked down the hall, past her brother's room, and into the bathroom. The bathroom was a full set, with a shower and tub. On the left was the sink with an assortment of products, mainly products of Naruko's. She moved toward the shower, placing her clothes on the lip of the sink before stripping off her pajamas. She entered the shower and turned on the water before she began to clean herself. She grabbed her bottle of shampoo before frowning at how light it was. Ah, man. Now, I gotta get another bottle. She got out of the shower and walked over to the sink, not caring about getting the floor wet from the water dripping off her body. She opened the cabinet under the sink and grabbed one of the many bottles that were stacked in there. I really like my long hair, but taking care of it is such a pain. She moved back to the shower, tossing the empty shampoo bottle into the trash. She got back into the steaming water before she began to clean her body. After 40 minutes of showering, she threw open the shower curtain with her arms spread out and a big smile on her face. Ah, much better. She grabbed the sole towel that was on the wall hanger and began to dry herself off. She walked over to the mirror as she ruffled her towel in her hair. She finished up and took the towel off her head before she brought her hand up to wipe the steam off the mirror, enough to see her head, only to frown at the sight of her hair being a complete mess. HRRRRM. She tossed her towel to the ground before she opened the mirror cabinet and her eyes scanned all the things inside. Makeup, skincare, perfume, lotion. I get that Ino loves this stuff, but I barely use any of them. She slightly grumbled as the stuff made it hard to find what she was looking for. The products were gifts that Ino gave her on her last birthday. She had used them on occasion, but they weren't used much. She paid little to no attention to the fact that there was nothing of her brother's inside it. She found her hairbrush and grabbed it so she could straighten out her hair from the destroyed bird's nest she had for hair. Another 40 minutes were spent getting it to its normal soft straight texture. Once that was done, she smiled at herself in the mirror with a nod. Now I'm ready. She nodded and was ready to head out before she put her hands on her hips and bounced, allowing her to see her perky bounce in the mirror that was now free of steam. She blushed at how she was about to leave the bathroom without any clothes on. Oops. She hastily grabbed her panties and put them on before she grabbed her bra. After she adjusted them so that her S would fit in the piece of clothing, she tried to get the clip before frowning at how tight it was. Don't tell me I gotta get a bigger pair. She wouldn't complain about the Uzumaki genetics that gifted her with a figure at a young age, but it was a headache having to go to the store more often than the other girls to have to buy another pair of bras. Her mother even made a joke that if she kept growing, she might be as big as Suan when she becomes a woman. She grabbed her shirt and put it on before getting to her jacket. She tossed her jacket into the air in an attempt to mimic her father putting on his coat in the cool way she saw him do, only to yelp when something fell out of the jacket. Ouch. Thunk. She looked down to see a kunai lightly stabbed into the ground. Why is there a kunai in my jacket? She tried to think of the reason till she remembered that she had put a kunai in her pocket yesterday when she was talking to her friends after practice. She had picked it up after she dropped it from the match and absent-mindedly put it there. Oh. She brought her hand up to her right cheek to feel the cut it left. She gave a flat glare at the blood on her fingers before she huffed and shook her head. Not gonna let this ruin my day. She knew that it would heal soon, so she chose to ignore it. She took a step to leave the bathroom till. Snap. She paused as she felt something snap and it was clear that her panties snapped. She looked down and could feel them slip off her. She glared at her pants as she growled out. Oh, come on. She left the bathroom and made her way to her room. Once inside, got redressed with the required undergarments before she put the kunai down on her vanity desk and picked up a pair of hairbands. When she looked at the panties that had snapped, she figured that the kunai that fell from her jacket not only cut her cheek but the strap of her panties as well. Now, I have to go shopping. She grumbled to herself before looking at the hair bands in her hand. She stared at them for a second before she brought her hair up into her pigtails. Satisfied with her normal hairstyle set, she nodded before running out of her room to get some breakfast. She jumped down the stairs, landing on the bottom of them, before she looked to the dining room to see her father reading some papers with a cup of coffee while her mother was in the kitchen making breakfast. Kushina looked over to her daughter with a bright smile on her face. Good morning, Naruko, sleep well. Naruko nodded happily as she sat down at the table. Minato lowered his papers and smiled at his daughter. So, what are your plans for today, Naruko? It may be Saturday, but your graduation exam is coming up this week, so I want to make sure that you are ready for it. Naruko groaned as she laid her head on the table. It's Saturday. Why can't I just go have fun? Minato chuckled as he ruffled her hair. Alright, I'll let you do what you want, but please take some time in the day to get some training done. At least for the graduation required jutsu. Naruko lifted her head before crossing her arms. Dad, I can already do the kawarimi and henge easily. And I can do the shadow clone jutsu, something that is better than the clone jutsu. Not to mention that the extra credit jutsu part is going to be a snap since I have a bunch of jutsu already. She grumbled when she felt his hand on her head again. I know, but I just want to make sure that you graduate. Naruko smiled up at her father as her mother put a plate of food in front of her. Kushina smiled at her daughter. You can't start the day on an empty stomach. Naruko nodded as she looked at her plate. It was some scrambles, bacon, sausage, toast, hash brown, and a glass of milk. Thanks, Mom. With that, she began to eat her breakfast while her parents watched her for a second before getting back to what they were doing. It was then that another set of footsteps was heard and the rest of the family looked to the stairs to see Naruto coming down the stairs. The adults paused in what they were doing as they stared at the boy as he came in. The only sound that could be heard was the clinking of Naruko's utensils as she continued to eat. Naruto walked over to the kitchen, ignoring the subtle glare that Minato was giving him and the scrutinizing look from Kushina. Naruto got these looks every time he came into the kitchen as if they were waiting for him to make a sudden move in order to react. He opened the fridge and grabbed the bread before he moved to the toaster. Is that all you're going to eat? Naruto looked over his shoulder at his sister as she took a bite out of her eggs. He frowned at her before answering. It's not like I have anything else to eat. His eyes shifted to the stove to see that there was nothing left on the frying pan and no signs of any more being made. Naruko swallowed her mouthful as she frowned at the tone her brother was giving her. Hey, it's not my fault you got up late and missed breakfast. Naruto turned to stare at his sister. Who's the one that spent more than 2 hours in the bathroom taking up all the time? Hey, you should have gotten up early in order to do whatever it is you need in the shower. It's not like Enough. The two siblings stopped and looked at their father. Minato put his files down and glared at the male of the two. Naruto, that is no way to speak to your older sibling. Naruto met his glare. Really? Am I supposed to up to her just because she is older than me by 10 minutes? Or maybe I'm supposed to praise her for everything till I smack. Naruto stopped as a hand smacked him across the face before he turned to his mother to see her hand still up, ready to hit him again. He didn't put his hand on his face, letting it sting. That is enough out of you. Another word and you won't be eating anything today. Kushina stared into her son's eyes as he gave her a defiant look. Naruto didn't look away from his mother after hearing the threat. This wasn't the first time that she did this and he knew already that she wasn't going to cook for him anyway. She never did. Naruto's hand shot to his right as his toast popped out into the air from the toaster, not looking away. In his periphery, he saw Minato shift in his seat and he knew that man was a move away from attacking him. He brought one of the pieces of toast to his mouth before he walked past her. Naruko looked at what her brother did and asked, "Aren't you going to at least put some butter or jam on it or something?" There isn't any. Kushina glared at Naruto as he walked by. Hey, you're not allowed to leave. Naruto paused at the stairs before he looked at her. And what am I supposed to do here? Wait till Naruko finishes her meal. Naruko spoke up here. You might as well. What else are you gonna do? Naruto looked at his sister, over his father's shoulder, and down at her plate. Like I should sit at the same table while you eat all the food mom made for you and you alone. He could see Minato have a hand lay on the table and knew that if he stayed here any longer, things could get bad. He began to walk up the stairs as he finished the first piece of toast. Naruko glared at the stairs before she slumped into her seat and continued to eat, much more subdued. Minato noticed this and got up from his seat and moved to stand next to Naruko. Don't worry about it, Naruko. You shouldn't let this spoil your mood. Just think about passing the graduation exam and how you will be a genin soon. Naruko smiled up at her father before she chose to finish her meal. Minato looked over to the stairs with a slight glare on his face. Naruko finished her breakfast before she bolted up the stairs in order to get her equipment. Minato got up from his seat and kissed his wife as he got ready to leave for the Hokage office. Do you have any plans for today? Kushina shook her head. No, I plan on staying in for the day. We have plenty of everything in the fridge and pantry so we don't need to buy anything. Minato nodded before his eyes shifted to the stairs. Then keep an eye on things here. You know what you have to do. Kushina nodded as she looked at the stairs. They heard some fast-paced steps before they saw their daughter running down. Naruko paused at the sight of her parents and smiled. I'm heading out. Minato nodded. Good. Make sure that you get some training done. Naruko rolled her eyes with her smile still on her face. Got it. She waved at them before she ran out the door. Minato nodded before he looked at his wife. I'll be in the office for the whole day, but I will be here for dinner, so can you wait for me? Kushina nodded. Of course. Before she could kiss him, they heard the door open again. The two looked to the door to see Naruko running back inside. Sorry, I forgot something in my room. Minato shook his head as he let out a fond sigh. That girl. Naruko ran back down the stairs before bolting out the door. Kushina and Minato laughed a bit before Minato took a step back and waved at his wife before flashing away. Kushina smiled fondly at the empty space before it dropped as she looked up at the ceiling. For a few seconds, she stood there before she moved to the kitchen to wash the dishes from breakfast. Naruko ran out of the house with a big smile on her face. Once she was on the streets, she began to walk through the streets. She walked the streets with her arms crossed and head tilted back in thought. She was so deep in thought that she didn't notice the civilians bowing in greeting. What to do today? Her thoughts went to the graduation that was coming up. Her excitement could be seen as a smile appeared on her face. She knew that she would be put on a team and given a sensei, but she didn't have much expectations of it. Anyone would do for her and that was okay. But as her mind was on that, she figured that maybe she should get some training done. She knew she was ready, but she wanted more. Since it was early in the day, she knew that many of the training grounds would be empty and there was one that she wanted to get to. Turning down an alley, she began to make her way to get some training done. Hokage office. Minato was in his office going over some documents that showed the village's budget so he could establish where the money should go for this month. Normally he would receive these reports weekly and then he would look at where the money would go for that week. But Minato would do it for a month so he could have a more efficient money flow instead of having it flux constantly. Minato felt a breeze from the window and knew that he had a visitor. Hello, sensei. Hey, kid. Jiraiya sat on the window sill, looking over the room. No matter how many times he came here, he couldn't help but imagine Hiruzen sitting at the chair, grumbling about paperwork. Looks like you have everything handled here. With how nice the view is around the village, I don't see anything going wrong anytime soon. Minato sighed as he knew what his sensei was referring to. There was never a visit from the man that didn't have some sort of innuendo. He would like to have a casual talk with his sensei, but he knew that he had a job to do. As much as I would like to avoid talking about something that would get my wife to kill me, we have other matters to discuss. Jiraiya chuckled as he got inside the room. Geez, kid, this life is getting to you. Can't even have any fun anymore. He stood in front of the desk and crossed his arms with a smile still on his face. Minato made a hand gesture, causing swishing sounds heard by the two. Once he was sure, he did a few hand signs before he pressed his hand on the top of his desk, causing an array of writing to spread out throughout the room. Once the room was sealed and no sound would leave, Jiraiya's smile dropped as he looked at his student seriously. Minato looked at the older man with a serious look. What do you have to report? Jiraiya took a breath as he began his report. Well, kid, from what I could get, there is an organization that is gathering high-ranked missing nin from all of the great villages. For the time being, we don't know what they are after, but since they are gathering a S-rank shinobi, I am going to be keeping an eye on them if they become a threat. Minato took in this info and thought about it for a second before asking. Do you know any of the members? So far, they only have 6 members. The only one that I was able to gather was former mist swordsman Kisame. My sources say they are still looking for members, so I am going to have to spread my search out a bit wider in order to keep track of any living missing nin that could be potential members. Minato sighed as this group was something they would need to keep an eye on since they didn't know what they were after. But the fact that they are going after powerful missing nin told him that they would need to be wary. Well, it is good to be aware of them. Make sure that you find out what it is they are after and inform me of any suspicious movement they are doing. But make sure not to go beyond your bounds. They are a group of missing nin, so we don't have jurisdiction on them unless they stay in the land of fire. Jiraiya nodded. I plan to. After he finished this little report, he moved on to other matters and his smile returned. So how are things with Naruko? Minato smiled at the mention of his daughter. Her training has improved to a great degree. She hasn't been able to get any of Kushina's training done, but she has gotten proficient in using my fighting style and she began learning the Rasengan. Jiraiya smiled brighter at that. Already? How far has she gotten? We only started a few days ago, so she is still on the first stage. Her speed is about mid-chunin level, but I can say that she will get faster soon. Minato leaned back in his seat as he thought about Naruko's training. How about her fuinjutsu? Minato frowned as he shook his head. She has little to no affinity for it. She has gotten better in her calligraphy, but nowhere close for her to use seals in a fight or for general usage. Jiraiya let out a whining groan. Damn, was hoping I could show her some tips on it. Guess I'll have to wait till she is better. How is she compared to the other academy brats? I have no doubt that she will be labeled Rookie of the Year. She has her faults, but in skill, she is a level above the others. He had a proud smile as he knew that his daughter was more skilled than he was when he was her age, in some aspects anyway. The two stood there proud at the progress the girl was making before the older of them frowned and asked. And what about Naruto? At this, Minato opened a drawer before pulling out a few papers. When he is at home, with either me or Kushina, he does a small bit of practice, but so far, nothing to write about. The reports that I get from my Anbu have told me that his skill is abysmal. His taijutsu is slopping, full of openings, and he wastes energy in his attacks. Even with his Uzumaki genetics, he tires himself out fairly quickly. His chakra control is also poor. He may not have anywhere close to Naruko's chakra levels due to her being the Jinchuriki. He still has Uzumaki levels, but without the proper guidance, he wastes chakra in what he has. From what was seen, he can do the henge, but with his lack of attention to detail, he gets bits of other people wrong, so he is easy to find if he uses it. The kawarimi is something he can do, but the clone jutsu is his biggest fault. He overloads the clone, causing it to come out as a deflated vision of himself. He has no extra jutsu under his belt, so he has very little to use in fights. He moved to the next page of the report that the Anbu had given him. His handwriting is atrocious, so seals are something he will never have, and the test scores he has is barely passing. If I had to give him a placement in skill and knowledge, he is barely mid-civilian level. But with how he lacks the ability to use 2 of the 3 required jutsu efficiently, I doubt he will graduate. Jiraiya nodded as he filed all the info he had gotten. Has he shown any hostility toward Naruko? Minato nodded. He seems to have animosity toward her. I am not sure when it started, but he has grown more and more hostile toward her. I fear that what you told us about the prophecy is coming true. He may very well be the one who could stop Naruko from achieving the peace we want for the shinobi world. I fear it may lead up to Naruko's death with how he treats her. This morning I was afraid that he might attack Naruko with how angry he was glaring at her. I was ready to take him down if he made a move toward her, but he just left the room. Jiraiya frowned at that. So he is the one that could stop her. And with what you said, I wouldn't doubt that he might aim to kill her. Whether because he is jealous of her for having a power he doesn't or something else, we have to be ready for it. His frown disappeared as he brought up a brighter point. But with how you said their skills are, we won't have to worry about her since she could take him out if he does attack her. Minato still maintained his frown. Even a civilian can kill a shinobi if he gets one lucky shot. He thought about what else he could do in order to prepare Naruko in case Naruto found a way to beat her. Perhaps I should have Tsunade return to the village in order to teach her some of her techniques. Jiraiya crossed his arms as his frown became a bit more sober. Don't know if she'll come since she still blames Konoha for what happened to Dan, her brother, and Senesi. Minato nodded with a sigh. I know, but if it's to have Naruko prepared, I am willing to do what is needed. She is the one who will bring peace to the shinobi world, something that we have wanted for so long. Naruko needs to be ready. Maybe I can establish her proposal for a medical program to entice her to return. With how she wants things to be done right, she would need to come here in order to oversee it as it grows. He looked up at his sensei as he continued. I will leave it to you to find her and bring her back. Jiraiya had an aura of dread at the new mission he was given. Are you trying to kill me, Yaki? The second I start bringing this up, she may punch me all the way back to Konoha wherever she is. Minato gave a playful smirk at Jiraiya. Then you should be able to handle it since you have had to deal with those most of your life. Jiraiya slumped. You're so cruel to your sensei. The two shared a laugh at this little bit before he asked. So where are Naruko and Naruto at the moment? Minato looked out the window with a smile at the sight. Naruko is having a free day in the village. Naruto is at home, under the supervision of Kushina. Kushina was in the living room looking over some seals that she planned on having Naruko practice when they began her training again. She knew that Naruko was no good at it, but she needed to learn this stuff for the future. She was putting in some practice seals for Naruko till rumble. She felt the house rumble a bit and she felt a spike of chakra coming from above her. She looked up in shock before she ran toward the stairs. She could feel the amount of chakra coming from upstairs and couldn't help but dread what he was doing. She ran over to the room and burst through the door to pause at the sight. Naruto was in the middle of his room, in a horse stance with his hands in a tiger seal as a dome of chakra was flaring around him. He had his eyes shut as he continued to channel his chakra at what he was doing. HHRRRRRRRRRRRNNNNN. For a few more seconds, he continued to grunt in concentration till poof. Naruto peeked through one of his eyes to his side before he groaned in frustration at the sight. Laying on the ground was a deflated form of a failed clone attempt that looked to be twitching. He growled in frustration at the sight. Naruto. He jumped at the harsh call and looked to the door to see his mother standing there with a look of anger. How many times have I told you, you are not allowed to train in the household? Naruto frowned at her as she had said this to him many times. But all I'm doing is practicing the clone jutsu. No, you are not allowed to train at the household. If you want to train, you go to the training ground like everyone else. Naruto glared at her as he pointed out the window. Then can I train in our training field in the background? No, that is meant for your sister and you are not allowed to use it. Go to one of the public fields if you want to train. Naruto glared at her. He opened his mouth in order to retaliate but smack. He paused as he felt her slap to his face. He didn't lose his glare as she met his. Kushina glared down at him before she turned around. Go to the public grounds to train. Not here. She left the room and shut the door. She took a few steps from the door before she gripped her chest in pain. She knew of the prophecy. She was there when Jiraiya gave it, and she knew that in order to protect her daughter from what might hurt her, she would do anything. But why did the threat have to be her son? It hurt her having to hurt one of her children, but she had realized that if she didn't do what she was doing, she could lose both of her children. She was so afraid of the thought of her children dying that she subconsciously attached to the idea of protecting them. Yet the one that could lead to their death was one of them. She clung to the fact that, in order to protect her daughter, she must shun her son. After years of this, her actions of shunning him turned into anger at the idea that Naruto would be the cause of Naruko's death. This did not mean that it didn't hurt that she had to hurt her son. But after so many years, it became easier to the point that these bits of heartache were now few and in between. She thought back to the defiant look Naruto was giving him and her heartache stopped. Those could be the very eyes he gives her when he kills Naruko. But Kushina wouldn't allow that. To protect her daughter, she would take down her son. But she couldn't do anything yet since nothing was clear just yet. There was still that small voice of doubt about all this, but for now, she would continue this way. Especially since she has another reason now. She began to walk down the stairs, keeping her senses up in case he used his chakra again. Naruto growled at the door before he sat on the ground and crossed his legs. He looked out of the window as he was really tempted to leave so he wouldn't have to be here, but would it be worth it if he left the house to be spied on by the Anbu? He crossed his arms as he contemplated if he should. Ha! Naruko swiped her leg at the training post so hard that it snapped and flew away. When she landed on the ground, she panted as a bit of sweat ran down her face. After a few seconds of this, she stood back up and took a deep breath to recenter herself. She looked at the post and frowned at how her target was now useless. Her shoulders dropped at that before she put a hand on her chin in thought of what she could do right now. She gained an idea and brought her hand into a single hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Poof. Naruko took a breath before turning to her clone to see her brother standing there. She knew what she was doing and frowned at it. She looked him over before she got into a stance. The clone got into a stance as they stared each other down. Naruko charged at the clone before she jumped and swung her leg to kick him in the head. The clone blocked the kick before gripping the leg and swung the girl away. Naruko flipped in the air before she kicked off the ground and brought her fist into an uppercut in the clone's chin. The clone then poofed away and leaving her alone in the clearing. She took a breath before she summoned another clone in order to do the same as before. This went on for a few hours as she got some training done. Naruko blocked the kunai swipe from the clone with her own kunai as she and the clone were parrying each other's kunai. The clone parried upward before he let the kunai go, to spin over his head, before he spun left, grabbed the kunai with his left hand, and used the momentum to swipe at Naruko. Naruko leaned away from the strike before she brought her kunai up into the clone, dispelling it. She panted a bit before standing up straight. And that's 30. She wiped her forehead with her wrist as she thought about her training. She had fought against 30 clones, each one giving her a better challenge. But as they improve, she improves, and that was good in her book. She wiped her left cheek with her wrist and paused when she felt something other than sweat. She brought her wrist forward and looked to see that there was a bit of blood. Oh, great. Letting out a sigh, she felt that she had done enough training for the day, but there were still things she could do for the day. She made a choice and began to leave the training field for another sort of improvement. Once she left, an Anbu dropped onto the field and looked over the results. It's impressive how much she has improved. Training by using the image of that boy, I can say that what the Hokage wished aligns with this. The Anbu looked in the direction of where the girl left with a second thought. Wonder how much better she would be if she used the Kyuubi's power. With that last inquiry, the Anbu left. Naruko looked up at the building in front of her with an expression of dread. She didn't want to go into it, but she knew that it was the best place to get what she wanted. Letting out a deep sigh, she walked in to get things over with. Lady Namikaze, welcome to the Konoha Library. The building Naruko entered was the Konoha Library, a large building of 3 floors and an open-plan first floor that had several different sections, from fantasy to horror. For civilians and shinobi, Naruko walked up to the female who was at the front desk with a smile on her face. Thank you for having me. I came here cause I feel I need a bit more under my jutsu belt. She beamed at how the girl came to them in order to learn something new. There were many different locations that hold things for shinobi, such as the shinobi archives on the south side of the village and the jutsu library in the west. The fact that the Hokage's daughter came to this public library would boost the recognition of the facility. It is why the staff at the library feel ecstatic when the girl comes here, since this library isn't used as much as the others. The jutsu they have in their shinobi section deals with E, D, and low-rank C-rank jutsu. They would occasionally get a B rank jutsu, but that is only if it is a low B rank jutsu and another far more efficient version is found. And the majority of the shinobi care only for the better jutsu. She bowed at the girl. Of course, is there something specific that you want? Naruko put a finger on her chin in thought before she shrugged. Do you mind showing me what you have? The woman nodded. Of course. She put a sign on the desk to say she would be back in 10 minutes before she gestured politely for the girl to follow her. The two walked up to the third floor with Naruko looking around at the sections they passed. This wasn't the first time she came here, but sometimes the facility moves the sections around. They made it to the shinobi jutsu section and they began to walk through the aisles for the girl to find what she was looking for. After 30 minutes of going through the jutsu section and considering the recommendations and the ones that caught her interest, the woman bowed to the girl as they finished and Naruko was leaving. It was a pleasure assisting you, Lady Namikaze. Naruko looked over her shoulder and smiled at the woman. Thank you for your assistance. She left the building and made it to the street and wondered what she should do now. It was as she was thinking that. Grumble. Naruko looked down at her stomach and chuckled sheepishly. Guess it's time for lunch. Nodding to herself, she began to make her way to get something to eat. Naruto slurped up some of the noodles from his bowl as he was enjoying a nice meal of ramen at Ichiraku Ramen. If you eat that any faster, then you aren't going to be able to enjoy it, Naruto. Naruto looked up to see Ayame giving him an incredulous look. I'm enjoying it. I'm enjoying the flavor and the fact that you are using the noodles from the previous batch in this one. Ayame eyed him as she crossed her arms. How would you know that? Naruto pointed his chopstick at the bowl as he gave a foxy smile. Because I can tell one ramen bowl from another. I can tell you that you had to use 2 different packs of noodles and ingredients since the flavor is different from one and the other. Ayame shook her head in exasperation. I swear, you have the weirdest skills, Naruto. You keep coming up with something that no normal person could think of. I'm surprised that you don't make a career out of the odd things you can do. If I did that, I would make a killing, but I wouldn't be able to enjoy my free time as much as I like. The two had a chuckle at that, both knowing that Naruto wouldn't be able to do that. Ayame crossed her arms as she looked at the boy. Though, I do find it weird how you get Ryo only to spend it on the very thing you make. Naruto stuck his tongue out at her. Hey, I think it works in my favor. Naruto actually works at Ichiraku Ramen. It is how he is able to get any money to use for himself since he doesn't have any money himself. He was offered to work at the stand by Tuki when the man found the boy sitting at one of the park's benches with a rumbling stomach. The man offered him a free bowl, but the boy said that he should at least work at washing dishes in order to pay for it. After that, the boy would occasionally come in order to work for a meal till the man offered to hire the boy. Now Naruto works in the kitchen, where no one can see him, to get some income. However, a good amount of the income goes right back to the shop since he tends to eat here than anywhere else. Ayame giggled at what Naruto said before she gained a questioning look. Naruto, why do you come here at this time every time you are free? I mean, it's almost always the same time with only a couple of minutes difference. Naruto had taken a bite of noodles as he blinked at her before he slurped them up. Swallowing his food, he answered. I come here because not many people eat at this time. I want to avoid dealing with the people of this village. Naruto, don't you think that you are being a bit too harsh? Naruto paused as his look became serious. No. After a few seconds, he looked up at her and spoke. Actually, can I get this bowl to go? Ayame was a bit surprised about the request before she looked at the clock. Realizing what the time meant, she spoke. Naruto, don't you think that you should? Ayame. She paused at the harsh tone he was giving her, but she knew why he did it. She may not fully understand it, but she knew it. I appreciate what you are trying to do, but it won't ever happen. So please, to go. Ayame sighed before she took the bowl from the table and took it to the back. After a minute, she came back with a takeout box and handed it to Naruto. I still think you should try, Naruto. Naruto took the box gratefully before he moved to walk past the counter to the back of the restaurant. Maybe if it were years ago, but now. He opened the door and looked over his shoulder at her. I can't. He left the restaurant out the back entrance before looking around to see that he was in the clear. Ayame sighed as she watched him leave before she moved to the stove so she could work on the next batch of ramen. It was only seconds later that she heard the sound of incoming customers. Sakura, I'm telling you that eating here is good for you. Naruko, you are the only one that would say something like that. You live off the stuff. I don't know, forehead. Maybe all of that ramen goes straight to her chest. Why else would she? Ino. Ayame moved from the back and saw Sakura, Ino, and Naruko sitting at the seats. Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen. Can I take your order? Naruko put a bag onto the floor and smiled at Ayame as she raised her hand. Hey, Ayame, can I get a bowl of miso ramen? Sakura raised her hand as she ordered. I'll take a plate of rice crackers. Ino was about to order the same thing till her eyes went to Naruko's chest. I'll have what Naruko is having. Sakura looked past Naruko, since the whiskered blonde female was sitting in between the two, and gave the Yamanaka a look of shock. Why? Ino just gave Sakura a pointed look before pointing to Naruko's chest. Those are two very good reasons. She then pointed to Sakura with a teasing smirk. And you could use some of it if you ask me. Sakura glared at Ino as she was really tempted to hit the Yamanaka but she couldn't reach her. Crossing her arms, in frustration and to hide her chest, she huffed and looked away. Naruko looked down at her chest before she lightly slapped Ino's shoulder. Don't use me as a way to tease Sakura. Anyway, are you two ready for the graduation exam? Sakura nodded as she answered. Yeah, I've been studying a lot so I can get as high a score as I can. Ino shrugged as she was nonchalant about it. I'm sure I'll do fine. I know I'll graduate but I already know that I'll be part of the Ina Shika-cho team. My dad already told me about it. She leaned her elbow on the table as she looked at Naruko. But what about your brother? Do you think he is ready? Naruko scoffed as she shook her head. No way. He's no good at taijutsu, has no ninjutsu, and we've all heard his test scores when he is called out. There is no way he can pass with those levels of skills. Sakura tilted her head as she asked her. There is something I want to know, why isn't he as good as you? You both live in the same house and have the fourth Hokage as a father. He should be just as good as you, right? Naruko shook her head. He just at all the stuff he was taught. Dad told me that he had tried to teach Naruto some of the stuff but Naruto didn't care about any of the stuff and when he did try, he would at it. She crossed her arms with a scowl on her face. I don't get why he is trying God be a shinobi if he is no good at it. You've seen that almost everyone in the class can beat him. Sure he gets a couple of wins but it's all luck. He should quit trying. Ino shrugged her shoulders. Maybe he has his reasons. Naruko huffed out of her nose. I doubt it. Ayame overheard all this and she had to wonder herself why Naruto was trying to be a shinobi if he wasn't any good at it. But maybe he has his reasons. I just don't know what they are. Night. Naruko was heading home as the day had ended and she was tempted to just go to bed. She saw that she was almost there only to pause. She grumbled to herself as she knew this made things complicated. Great. She turned into an alley to get things done. Kushina was setting up the table as she had finished making dinner. As she put the plates on the table, a flash of yellow was seen and she looked up to see that Minato had arrived. About time you got here. We were about to eat without you. Minato chuckled as he took off his coat and hung it on the wall before walking up to his wife. I don't think I did anything that would warrant you doing that to me. Kushina put her hands on her hips as she gave him a mock glare. Oh, I'm sure you did something that could warrant it. Did you forget about last month when you got the wrong item for me? Minato's sweat dropped as he thought about the incident. But, Kushi, you told me to get the specific brand and I was sure I got it right. I don't believe you did, since you got it wrong. Minato felt tiny as Kushina gained size and looked down at him with an aura of anger. Before anything else could be done, the door opened and the two looked to see Naruko walking through the door. The two of them spoke at the same time. "Welcome back, Naruko." Naruko smiled at the two and tried to hold in her drool as she could smell the food coming from the kitchen. "Hey, guys, I'm back." Minato moved to hug his daughter before he looked her over. "So where were you all day?" Naruko shrugged as she moved her bag behind her back. "I was around. And before you ask, I got some training done." Minato nodded as that aligned with the report that he got from the Anbu. The Anbu member didn't watch her through the whole trip and only watched her training, but that was fine. As long as she was getting better, he was happy. He took a step back and eyed the girl as he saw her trying to hide something. "Naruko, what do you have behind your back?" Naruko shook her head as she took a step back. "Nothing." Minato crossed his arms as he looked disapprovingly at his daughter. "Naruko, you know it isn't nice to keep secrets in this family." Naruko took a few more steps away from the man. "I said it's nothing. Naruko, show me." "No," came her whiny defiant answer as she began to run away from the man. Minato began to chase her as the two began to run around the living room at normal civilian speed. "Naruko, show me what you have." "No." Kushina sighed as she watched her daughter and husband run around like children. She looked up at the ceiling as she focused her senses on Naruto. She did not feel any fluctuation of chakra coming from him till she felt a small flicker of it. It was so small that she didn't think much of it. It was so small that it was negligent. With how poor his control was, if he tried anything, she would feel it instantly. Naruto was sitting in the middle of the room as he stared at the wall, ignoring the sound coming from downstairs. He sat there not moving till his head flinched and he got up from the ground. He focused on the surroundings before he moved to his window and opened it. He took a step back as a figure jumped in and into the center of the room. He crossed his arms as he looked at the figure. Naruko stood there before facing Naruto. "Well," Naruto shrugged. "Don't get why you ask when you are gonna get the info anyway. I just feel that it's polite to ask regardless." Poof, she went up in smoke to reveal Naruto standing in her place. The Naruto that had his arms crossed smirked as he gave a two-finger salute. Poof, before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto paused as he looked through his memories and frowned at how the clone was smacked in the face by Kushina. "Glad I prepared for this." He walked up to where the clone was and picked up a seal tag that he had placed on the clone just in case. The tag was something that could allow a shadow clone to take more than just one hit at the cost of chakra. The problem is that it takes a lot of chakra from the clone in order to keep it from dispelling, in which the clone can no longer use any chakra if it wants to stay existing. Naruto sighed as he moved over to his bed and sat down before he reached under his mattress, pulled out another tag, and placed it on the wall. Channeling a small amount of chakra into it, he sealed his room off from the people downstairs so they wouldn't be able to sense any of his chakra. Once that was done, he lifted up his arm and pressed his finger on a tag he had on his wrist as another poof was heard. He brought his hands up and caught the ramen takeout box and scrolls he had gotten from the library. He smiled at what he had before he winced at the cut he had on his left cheek. Today was full of close calls. He reached behind himself and grabbed something that was attached to his back before pulling it off. It was another seal tag that he made to keep his henge up all day. This was how he had been improving without anyone noticing. And it all started with his first library visit. Flashback. Naruto walked into the library in the hopes that he could learn something that could help him improve his skills. He wasn't sure what he should focus on, but he figured that anything at the moment would help. Due to how Naruko was being taught by those who had so many jutsu that would lead her ahead of the others, he chose to work on some skills by himself. He walked up to the receptionist, who was reading a magazine, and spoke to get her attention. "Excuse me, can you tell me where the shinobi section is?" "Mainly the jutsu section for practice." He watched as the woman lowered the magazine before he saw the typical scowl that he had seen on the villagers' faces. He had hoped that he wouldn't get it in a public location like the library, but it turns out that he was wrong. There is no shinobi section in this library, was her sharp response as she brought her magazine back up to avoid looking at the boy. Naruto frowned at the clear disgust in her voice but kept his mouth shut. He wanted to snap back. He knew from experience that it would only escalate the issue. He continued to try and be polite to the woman despite his anger. But I was informed that there is a section in this specific library for shinobi to check out jutsu gathered to learn. She slammed the magazine to the desk as her sneer got worse. They lied, now leave. Naruto was really tempted to punch her, but that wouldn't help his case. But security. A pair of chunin flickered into the lobby to stand behind Naruto. Escort this person out for disrupting the library occupants. Naruto didn't get a chance to say anything as he was lifted up by the back of his shirt and carried away. He was thrown out onto the street before he heard laughter from the chunin and villagers who witnessed it. He picked himself off the ground and scowled at the two chunin as they walked back inside. He grit his teeth as he was pissed at how this always happened to him in any store or facility. Getting up, he walked away and out of sight from all the villagers. He made it to an alleyway and leaned against the fence as he thought about what he should do now. This was his best chance at learning some jutsu that wouldn't garner too much attention yet still help him out in the long run, but of course, he wasn't allowed in. I bet if it was Naruko, she would kiss my feet and give me all the jutsu scrolls in there. He growled at how he was sure that would be what would happen till he got an idea. He closed his eyes to make it look like he was still frustrated when in reality he was focusing on his chakra sensing. He couldn't believe his luck. He couldn't sense any of the typical Anbu watching him as they usually did. Whether out on a mission, leaving after seeing that he wouldn't get anything from the library, or none were assigned today, he didn't care. But he was in the clear and he brought his hands up into a seal and hanged himself to look like Naruko. He took a few deep breaths to calm down so he wouldn't have a scowl on his face. Once calm, he put on a happy smile and walked out of the alley and towards the library. As he walked back into the library, he was so tempted to scream in anger as he saw that all the people that were laughing at Naruto just seconds ago, were now smiling and bowing in respect at Naruko. He couldn't even bite his tongue or cheek as it might dispel the henge. He walked into the library and saw the receptionist smile and bow to Naruko. Welcome, Honorable Namikaze, how can I help you? Naruto had to strain to hold the smile. How about slamming your head into the desk, you hypocritical bitch? Keeping that to himself, brought out some excitement to keep up the act. I need to train in some elemental jutsu and was told that I can find some scrolls here. The receptionist nodded with glee. Of course, right his way. She walked out from behind her desk and began to lead Naruko to the shinobi jutsu section on the third floor. Once they made it to the section, she turned and gestured to the shelves of scrolls. Here they are. Let me know if you need anything else. Naruko beamed at the woman as she had stars in her eyes at the sight of the wall of scrolls. Thank you very much. She watched as the woman left with a skip in her step. She waited till the woman was out of sight before dropping the smile. Naruko turned to the shelves and looked around for something that would be useful. It took some time going through the selection before something of interest was found. They were simple training scrolls, but they were better than what he was being taught in the academy. Naruto didn't have to worry about Naruko actually coming here and potentially ruining this new way of learning for him, since she never would come to the library. Naruko hated reading, so she would avoid the library like a plague, and she didn't really need to come here for anything. She was being trained by several powerful shinobi with a plethora of jutsu to teach her. Flashback end. That was how Naruto began to train in secret and how he was able to learn about seals and ways to improve several aspects of his fighting and chakra control. But it still had its problems as he had to make sure that no one saw both him and his sister out at the same time when he was doing this method. That was when he trained his chakra sensing in order to keep his sense open for his sister so that he could avoid her. Leaving the house was actually the easy part, since a lot of times, Naruko would get up so early that no one else was up yet. That is when she isn't spending so much time in the bathroom getting ready, but if she does, he just looks for a moment when no one is looking at the house. Once he has his chance, a clone jumps out the window and uses the henge to go back inside so that he can leave in his own henge. The reason for the process was a precaution. If either of their parents stops him in the henge, whether they caught on or want something from Naruko, the clone can dispel while he is still in his room so that he can't be blamed for it. He had to make sure he was careful so he wasn't caught. One of the close calls today was when he was in the training field and the Anbu began watching him in the middle of it. He had to shift his fighting to be more aligned with how Naruko would actually fight. It wasn't his way of fighting, but it was able to fool the Anbu and have him not question what he was seeing. And they wouldn't suspect him because of the level they believe him to be at. They can't consider him a threat if they don't consider him capable. He opened the takeout box and grabbed the chopsticks as he took a bite of ramen. Once he had some noodles dangling from his mouth, he opened one of the scrolls that he got from the library as he heard a crash below him. Minato sat up as he had fallen after catching Naruko and was able to get a grip on the bag. But thanks to the fall, the back ripped open and the item inside flew into the air. He felt something land on his head and reached up and grabbed it before bringing it in front of him. He saw that it was a piece of cloth before he opened his palm to let it splay out in his hand. It was then he saw what it was. A pair of panties. His eyes widened as he looked up to see his daughter giving him a look of extreme embarrassed anger. You. Pervert. Smack. Minato's head turned from the smack as he felt Naruko grab the panties out of his hand and run up the stairs. Naruko had met up with Sakura and Ino during her time out and they went shopping for Naruko's new bra and panties. After that, she spent the rest of the day with them, with a small bit of training with the girls in one of the training fields on the other side of the village from Naruto. Not that she knew that. With Minato's head turned from the smack, he saw the angered look that Kushina was giving him. He began to sweat at the sight of her hair gaining the appearance of the Kyuubi's 9 tails. He began to crawl backward away from her as he tried to defend himself. Now, Kushina, you know it was an accident. Kushina cracked her knuckles as her eyes flashed white. I didn't know you picked something like that up from your sensei. I'm going to have to beat it out of you for the sake of our family. Screams could be heard from the household, but no one was willing to see what it was since the sound of something rampaging scared them away. Minato was nursing a hurt face as the family was at the table eating the dinner that Kushina made. Naruko's embarrassment had died down, but she was doing her best to humph away every time her father looked at her. Kushina had a bright smile on her face as she piled on the food on her plate. Naruko looked at her family in order to get back to the present till she saw the empty seat that was next to Kushina. Hey, Mom, where's Naruto? Kushina paused in her serving before she frowned. Naruto did something unacceptable and he isn't allowed to eat today. Naruko tilted her head. What did he do? Why isn't he allowed to eat? Kushina's mood continued to drop. You don't need to know it, Naruko. But, slam. Naruko jumped as Kushina slammed her hand on the table. The woman gave Naruko a hard look. You don't need to know it, Naruko, so drop it. Naruko nodded before she continued eating. She looked to her father to see that he had gained a stern look on his face and knew that she shouldn't bring it up. She looked up as she wondered what it was that Naruto did, but if it was so bad that it made Mom and Dad mad, she figured he deserved it. She looked back at her mother and saw the amount she had. Hey, how come you get to eat more? Kushina smirked at her daughter. Because I am the one serving it. No fair. Gimme more. Burp oof. Maybe I ate too much. Naruto was sitting on his bed with a satisfied smile on his face as he enjoyed the Ichiraku ramen he got. So far, today was a good day of training, and he had no worries about the graduation exam. He looked at the open scroll in his right hand as he mentally thanked the woman at the library for her help. Ulzwer. The receptionist from the library was coming out of her shower as she felt refreshed after the long day. She ran her hand down her chest as she made her way to the full-body mirror she had in the corner so she could start to get dry. When she stood in front of the mirror, she froze at the sight. Blue hair, green skin. Her eyes widened as she lifted her hand to her face in disbelief at what she saw. Naruto smirked as he wished he could see her reaction when she sees his thanks. Getting back to his task, he held his left hand up next to his head. He read the instructions and knew that this jutsu would be helpful. Mystic Palm Jutsu. His hand gained a green glow as he pressed it on his cut cheek. He had to practice and the best target was himself. Naruto put his final kunai into his kunai pouch before he put it on his leg. He couldn't help but feel a bit liberated as he knew that he would be getting out of that academy. Sure, it was only 4 years, but when those 4 years had him sit through Iruka's tortuous lectures and the poor teaching of the instructors, anyone would want to be out of that. He did better on his own than he did at the academy, but if he had to make one positive about being there, it was a time when the Anbu tended not to watch if he sneezed to the right instead of the left. Seriously, what was with his father wanting to make sure that he didn't do anything out of what was expected? Hell, it got even worse in the last 2.5 months with the man doubling the normal amount of eyes on him. He finished up getting his gear ready before he grabbed the spares, moved over to the corner of the room, and pulled out a plank from the floor. He put the extras in the little space under the floorboards. Once those were hidden, he stood up and smirked as he was ready to graduate and get the freedom that comes with becoming an adult. At least in the eyes of the shinobi ranks. He had plans after he graduated, but before that, he still had one last trial to get through. He left his room and walked down the stairs. As he was descending, he heard some cheering from the first floor. His mood dropped as he heard his sister boasting about how she was going to take the graduation tests by storm. He let out a sigh, as he realized that he was so into his own excitement that he drowned out the world around him. Not a good thing to do if I want to live as a shinobi. Naruko was bouncing in her seat as she was ready to head off to the academy to get to the graduation test. Calm down, Naruko. The academy isn't going to disappear before you head over there. Kushina smiled at how excited her daughter was. Minato chuckled as he walked up to stand next to his wife. If I recall, you were just as excited during your own graduation. You were so excited that your verbal tick kept coming out in every one of your sentences. He almost immediately regretted saying anything when he felt his wife's unique aura of death aimed at him. The man held his hands up in surrender as he was not ready to die just yet. He would like to live a few more decades. Naruko giggled at the sight of her father being scolded. Once her little giggle fit was over, she looked over to the wall clock to see that it was actually time for her to head over to the academy. She jumped up and pumped her fist. It's time. She was about to head out the door to run full speed, only to stop when Minato placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Naruko, before you go, we want to tell you something. Naruko looked up to her father with a tilt of her head. Kushina walked up to her and knelt down. We want you to do your best while at the graduation test. Remember, just because it is a test, it doesn't mean that you should take it lightly. Give it your absolute all. Do you understand? Naruko nodded so hard that her pigtails almost flipped. You got it. Minato smiled as he brought something else up. Also, when you graduate, we have a surprise for you. Naruko turned to look at Minato with stars in her eyes. Ooh, what is it? What is it? The adults chuckled before Kushina placed a hand on her daughter's head. You will find out when you get back. Naruko whined as she was now super curious about what it was that her parents were going to surprise her with. She wasn't the only one. Naruto was curious about what it might be that his parents planned on giving Naruko, but for now, he chose to let it go since he would find out when she boasted about it later on. He continued down the stairs and made his way to the door. Minato noticed him and eyed the boy as he walked toward the door. He wasn't the only one, as Kushina did the same. Hey, Naruto. Naruto paused and looked over his shoulder at Naruko with a raised eyebrow. Naruko gained a cheeky smirk as she put her hands on her hips as she proudly asked. Guess what Mom and Dad said to me? Not giving him the chance to actually say anything, she continued. He said that he is going to teach me his signature move when I graduate the exam. Naruto rolled his eyes as he was in earshot when their father said he would give her something. And based on the words he used, it wasn't even that. All they said was that they had a surprise to give when she came back. If he had to guess, he figured it might have been some custom weapon or a new outfit for her to use, but that was all just a guess. Not wanting to encourage her bragging, he nodded. Good for you. He opened the door and left before she even had a chance to respond. Naruko didn't like the fact that he had left without her and ran toward the door. Hey, no fair. She stopped at the door and looked back at her parents. Bye Mom, bye, Dad. She opened the door and ran after her brother so that she wouldn't lose. Minato had a grim look on his face as Kushina grew worried. She looked at her husband and asked, what are we going to do? As things are, he might. Don't worry. Things will work out, I know it. As long as we are careful, nothing can go wrong. Kushina nodded before she turned to the door with an angry expression. They better. Naruto was now sitting in his seat as he waited for the class to start. He was bouncing his leg up and down in impatience. Why is it that when you are at the last stretch of things, it always seems to slow down to the point of standing still? His eyes roamed the classroom and he could almost think of it as being nostalgic, if it weren't for the fact that his time in the academy did nothing for his growth and potential. Sure, he can say that he learned about the history of the villages, shinobi, and the many times the second daimyo fell off his chair, real lesson by the way, but when it came to the practical stuff, he was practically self-taught. Naturally, with how he kept things to himself, he didn't really know how he fared against the other students, but he was pretty sure he was nowhere near the dead last. Naruko was talking with Ino and Sakura as they were anticipating the arrival of Iruka and Mizuki so they could get to the exams. Man, why do they have to take so long to get here? They should come early so we can graduate already. Ino shook her head as she smiled at her friend. Easy, Naruko, by the end of the day, you will have that headband and you can be happy about it all you want. Naruko hugged Ino as she cried crocodile tears. Ino, don't fail. How else are we going to go on missions if you don't graduate with me? She rubbed her cheek against the Yamanaka, who was grumbling about Naruko being too clingy. Sakura giggled as she patted Naruko on the shoulder. From all the training we did, I don't think any of us are going to fail. She was going to continue till she noticed that someone was missing. Either of you see Hinata? She's usually the first one here. Ino pushed Naruko off before shrugging. I haven't seen her, but I wouldn't worry about her since I'm sure she'll show up. She's been just as excited about it as the rest of us. She just knows how to hide it better. It was at that moment that the female Hyuga walked into the room, getting everyone's attention. Hinata felt a little self-conscious due to her new appearance. She was now wearing a short-sleeved light violet hooded jacket that she had halfway zipped up over a black shirt. On her arms were black greaves and fingerless gloves that had metal plating over them. For her lower half, she had a short dark gray skirt over black shorts. For her legs, she wore toeless boots with greaves over her calves and her kunai pouch around her right calf. Hinata blushed at the attention she was given and immediately moved over to her friends. Ino gave an impressed whistle as she looked at Hinata's new attire. Nice look, Hinata. I didn't know you had that kind of clothing. Hinata brought up her hood as she softly spoke. These were a gift for my graduation day and I was too embarrassed to wear them, that's why it took me a while to arrive. Sakura had a small laugh at how timid Hinata can be at some of the simplest things. Don't worry about it, Hinata, You look good in your new outfit. Hinata nodded in gratitude as she sat in her seat and waited for the instructors to arrive. Naruto had noticed her new outfit and thought about adding bracers himself, but that would be something for later, since much to his bitter pleasure, Iruka and Mizuki walked in. Iruka moved to stand in front of his desk as he spoke to the entire class. He was surprised to see that they all stopped talking the moment he walked in, but he could figure that it was due to how they wanted to get things started. He was a little disappointed that he wouldn't be able to use his signature jutsu to get them to be quiet one more time, but he guessed that he should just be glad that most of them would graduate. Alright, everyone, I'm going to tell you what the exam will be before we begin. The first part will be a written exam that goes over what you have learned from my lectures. You will have 1 hour to complete it and we will watch to make sure you don't cheat. Afterward, we will have you perform the 3 academy jutsu so we know you have the basic jutsu all shinobi have. Finally, we will head outside in order to have matches. Usually, we would have you fight either Mizuki or me so we can evaluate your ability in combat, but we will have you fight each other so that we can get things moving. This will also allow you to show off any extra jutsu you have in order to gain extra credit. He looked at Mizuki and nodded. The silver-haired Chunin began to pass out the papers face down in front of all of them. Naruto noticed the Chunin channel chakra into the paper he put in front of him and already figured that there was a genjutsu on it. He watched as the man left and continued to pass the papers out. He narrowed his eyes at the man but knew that he couldn't just undo the genjutsu since he didn't want to bring attention to himself. His eyes shifted to the guy sitting next to him and smirked as he saw the guy looking somewhere else, whispering to another student. He waited for a moment when the two were not looking at the paper and immediately switched his paper with the guys. Since they were all face down, there was no sign of anything being wrong. Once they all had the test, Iruka nodded. Alright, everyone, you can begin your exam, now. Everyone flipped their exams over and began to do their test. Naruto saw the questions and knew he would be able to get a decent score. He had studied as much as he could in order to pass it, so he wasn't worried. His eyes shifted to the guy next to him and saw that the paper was blank on both sides. Sorry, but I'm not taking the chance. The student looked over the paper and wasn't sure if this was intentional or not. He sat there wondering about it for a few minutes before he realized that others were actually writing answers. He looked at his paper once more before he raised his hand to ask the instructor about his test. Naruto smirked when he saw Mizuki gain a confused look when the man saw what the problem was. Naruto felt that he had done well on the test since a lot of the questions he remembered from reading up on some of the actual history of shinobi. There were some questions that were extended information from Iruka's lecture, so unless someone went to read more about the history, there was no way they would know. He did it only because he was kicked out of the room a few times, so he didn't get the lecture. But he knew he needed to know it, so it was one of the things he spent his time disguised as Naruko. Now, the students were in the auditorium so that they could show off their ability to use the 3 basic jutsu. Naruto was leaning on the wall in the hallway as he waited for his turn. Despite how he was on his own, his mind went over how he was going to do this. I could use the shadow clone jutsu, but I don't know if I want to show off that much. Maybe I can just overdo the normal clone jutsu. I mean, all I need to do to make that work is make a lot of clones. He focused on his chakra sensing and was able to tell that there was a couple of Anbu nearby. He didn't know if they were here to report about the genin that were graduating or if they were here just for him, but either way, it made things harder for him to show off a bit since he did not want his father to realize his talents. The man was already on the brink of either throwing him out of the house or outright killing him as a potential threat to their so-called chosen one. He was brought out of his thoughts when Iruka came out of the auditorium and called for the next student. Naruko Namikaze. The female Namikaze stopped talking with Ino and Sakura, the pinkett already having her turn, and gave a victory sign to her friends as she headed toward the instructor. She noticed her brother watching her as she went in and gave him a condescending smirk with a 2-fingered salute. Naruto's mood soured at the sight. Why the hell does she always think we are in the middle of a contest that she is winning? He took a breath as he didn't want her, "I'm so much better than you and you are worthless" attitude, to get to him. He was really getting tired of that attitude from everyone. His need to get them all to stop was pushing him to show off a little more than just hold back enough to get the passing grade, but he calmed himself as he didn't need the Anbu to rat him out. "I want to hurry up and get this over with. I'm so close. Just one more day." Naruko finished doing the kawarimi and henge and was given top marks for how well she was able to use them. Her mother had made sure that she was able to get the henge perfect so that she would get the best score for it. Iruka smiled as he put the score for the jutsu that was performed. "Well done, Naruko, now can you please perform the clone jutsu for us? The number of clones does not matter, but they need to be stable clones that are hard to distinguish from you." Naruko was smiling wide as she put her hands into a single hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In multiple puffs of smoke, 20 shadow clones appeared around her, all of them smirking at the instructors who went slack-jawed at the sight. Mizuki shook himself out of his shock before he tapped Iruka on the shoulder. "You can't sit there being shocked the rest of the day, Iruka. Might as well pass her already so we can get a move on." Iruka shook his head before giving a bright smile. "Well done, Naruko, you are the only one that has done the shadow clone jutsu in your whole class." He wrote a high mark for Naruko's sheet as he continued. "I look forward to seeing how well you do in your kunoichi career." Naruko beamed at the praise as she was glad that she was able to surprise the teachers with her skills. She gave a big smile at Iruka. "You're gonna be surprised with what I can bring to the table." She began to run toward the door but paused when she got to the door. She looked back at the teachers with a solemn look. "Go easy on my brother, will you?" Iruka and Mizuki looked at each other before giving the girl an inquisitive look. Naruko shrugged before continuing. "I know that he doesn't have a chance in passing, but the least you can do is let him off gently. Maybe it will wake him up to how useless he is in being a shinobi." Iruka let out a sigh as he looked at his clipboard. "We'll be as fair with him as we have been throughout his time in the academy." Naruko nodded as she opened the door and went to join her friends. She was surprised that Naruto didn't even wait for his name to be called and was walking into the room. She shook her head with a sigh. Faster he hears the facts, the faster he can just stop being pathetic. Iruka looked up a little surprised to see Naruto walk in already. Honestly, he was not enthused by this one and was fine with holding it off a few minutes more, but he supposed that failing the kid sooner would be better than holding it off. "We didn't call for you yet, Naruto, but I suppose the faster we get this over with, the faster we can move on with our day." Naruto didn't give any indication that he was concerned about what they said as he stood in front of the two instructors. "I agree." The answer caused a raised eyebrow from both of them. Usually, he didn't respond in such a manner or at all, but they chose to shrug it off. Mizuki brought up his clipboard and already wrote down, "failed," on the 3 jutsu. Not once had he shown that he could do any of them efficiently, and he figured that it would save him time. His mind went to what he planned on doing later and how easy it was going to be to manipulate the boy into stealing the scroll. And whether or not the plan succeeds or fails, the boy would be dead either way. Iruka clicked his pen as he looked at the boy, uninterested. "All right, Naruto, you are to show us the 3 academy jutsu so." Before Iruka could finish, Naruto used the henge to transform into Hiruzen Sarutobi in full battle armor and staff before he used the clone jutsu to create 30 clones of Hiruzen and then used the kawarimi to switch places with a chair that was set up at the side. The reason he turned into Hiruzen Sarutobi was due to how there was no one alive of high standing that he wanted to turn into. He found out about the 3rd Hokage during one of his library visits and was able to find a full-body picture of the old man. He didn't know how the man would have acted or even what he sounded like, but what the instructors were looking for was an illusion that could pass off as the person, not how well they could impersonate said person. Iruka was shocked at how quickly the boy used all three of the jutsus with little to no sign of him channeling his chakra. He had never seen the boy practice the jutsu at all during his time at the academy, and with how practice went, Naruto had never shown any progress. He was brought out of his shock when Naruto, still in Hiruzen's form, walked back to his place. Naruto dispelled the henge and asked, "Well, how was that?" Iruka shook his head before he opened his mouth. Great. I pass." Naruto walked away as he smirked at how shocked he made the two. Or rather, how shocked he made Iruka while how pissed off he made Mizuki. Mizuki was baring his teeth in an expression of pure fury. This ruined things for him, as the jutsu portion of the exam took up a majority of the grades. And with how well Naruto did, there was a possibility that he could pass. Mizuki soon calmed himself as he knew the next part of the exam would be what guaranteed the brat to fail. Naruto walked out of the room and moved to the side to avoid anyone's view. "Well, how did you do?" The condescending voice stopped him in his steps and he looked over his shoulder to see Kiba looking at him as if he was ready to make fun of him. He rolled his eyes and kept going. Kiba let out a chuckle. "Hey, come on, it's not the end of the world if you fail the fastest in the academy. Maybe you can pass in a few more years. Maybe I can train you when I become a Jonin." Naruto took a breath as he always found Kiba's alpha attitude annoying. He was sure that when they graduated, he wouldn't have to deal with Kiba's attitude ever again. He decided to leave the room, not caring about anyone else's results. Kiba shrugged as he walked away. Guess, he doesn't want to hear anyone else graduate. Hidden in the shadows was the Anbu that was set up to watch the boy and made a mental note about how fast he was able to do the jutsus needed. She was curious though, since she had never seen him practice at all during her time observing the boy. She was even more interested now in how well he did in the final portion of the exam. Minato was in his office looking over some papers that were brought to him by his secretary. He was looking over some of the budgets of the East Side Marketplace, but his mind was not entirely on it. He was thinking about how the students at the academy were in the middle of the graduation exam. He smiled at how he knew his daughter was going to do. He had trained her to the best of his abilities and the girl could be a low chunin if not mid, at her normal powers. Should she use Kyuubi's power, Jonin level at least. There was then a knock on the door and Minato looked up from his papers and responded. "Enter." The door opened to reveal an old man who had most of his face and right arm wrapped in bandages. Minato grew serious at the sight of the man. "Danzo, to what do I owe this visit?" There was a slight bite to his voice but not enough for it to be noticeable, at least to those not paying attention. Danzo is one of the village elders who can be considered an advisor to the Hokage. However, he is also considered the biggest issue. Especially since Danzo has his own shinobi force that is loyal to only him. Danzo walked up to stand in front of the Hokage's desk before he spoke. "I know that you are busy at the moment, but I wish to bring up my previous request." Minato gave the man a hard stare as he steepled his fingers. "And my answer will remain the same." Danzo frowned at the answer. He knew that this would be the result but he still had to try and get what he wanted. "Sir, I understand your apprehension with this but you must understand that under my tutelage, results are sure to be achieved. Your results are not something I am looking forward to. Your root agents have never proven to me that they are of use and since I asked you to disband them, there is no reason for me to allow anyone to work under you. And yet his potential is obviously wasted in the academy. And after today, should he fail, he will still not be put in your care." Danzo tightened his grip on his cane. "Why are you so adamant in not allowing your son to work with me? I know that he is subpar in most of the shinobi arts. This is clearly telling us that the system is not fit for what he could become. That is not a fault of the system, it is the fault of the student. He has no talent in learning these things and if that is what is to become of him, then so be it. Naruto will not become an agent of your program. The last remnants of root is all I'll allow but I will not give you any more resources than you have already stolen from Konoha. Danzo huffed in agitation as he turned around and chose to leave. Your son could very well be a good bodyguard for your daughter, yet it seems that you do not want him to improve at all. Minato didn't lose his stoic expression. Talent brought up by you is questionable. Your agents were loyal to you, not Konoha. This isn't something the village needs. The foundation of the village is community and family, not a weapon that is to be used by one person. Danzo looked over his shoulder. A weapon is what the village needs in order to maintain its standing. Being peaceful can only bring about chaos. He left the room as it was clear he was not getting anywhere with this. As he walked into the hallway, he thought about how far his plans pertaining to the son of the Hokage had gotten. Years ago, he believed that if the children of the Hokage were trained properly, they could be used as weapons to subjugate the other villages and force their loyalty. He had wanted to take them into his program so that they could be properly trained in such a mindset. Yet he had to hold off on his acquisition of them as he believed that learning from their parents would allow them to gain power he could not bring out. However, in hindsight, that might have been his mistake, as it seems that Naruko had become too high profile. He couldn't take her with him without getting more eyes on him. Yet the son was not as well known as the daughter. He figured he could use this as a way to sway the boy to his side, and so he had chosen to make a situation to let the boy choose to join him. By using some Uchiha that were on the low end in status, he would manipulate the civilians into having some animosity toward the boy. By planting slight suggestions into the minds of people, they would blame the boy for the tragedy that happened the day of their birth. What came as a surprise for the old man was that there were already such things that were in the minds of the people. Thanks to the report of the Uchiha he had employed, the people already blamed Naruto for that incident, like it was his birth that summoned the creature. What the Uchiha did was just cause the animosity to become hostile. Another surprise was that the Hokage didn't seem to even be concerned about it, but that was of little concern for him. And yet, the man would still not give the boy to the old man, for some reason or another. He would have used Shisui's eye to manipulate the Hokage into giving the boy away, but if he did, he would not be able to use it again for many years to come. He can be patient. The boy would be the best tool once trained to obey the old man. Having a shinobi that has Uzumaki blood would be a boon in many different ways. As for the Uchias that worked with Danzo in this little scheme, it was easy to dispose of them as he had access to missions given out to the shinobi. All Danzo needed to do was send a team of his root agents to follow the Uchihas and kill them before they could return. It was thanks to this that he was able to achieve a few Sharingan eyes for his own personal project. Danzo's mind went to whether he should meet up with the boy after the academy ends to extend an invitation. Based on the records, the boy might be eager to get some teaching that cannot be achieved while in the academy. Meanwhile, back in the Hokage office, Minato was able to calm himself down at the sight of Danzo. He didn't trust the man at all, as it was clear that the elder had an agenda that benefited himself and not Konoha. The request for his son was something that Danzo had been bringing up for some time now, and part of him would have gone with the notion if it wasn't for the fact that he doesn't trust Danzo at all. Naruto being taken away and trained to protect Naruko was a tempting offer, but Danzo has no interest in anything other than oppressing the other villages into submission. This is the kind of action that would breed enemies on many different sides. And even if Naruto was trained to obey orders, it would not be the Hokages, it would be Danzo, and with how Danzo had wanted the Hokage seat ever since Hiruzen had been Hokage, he would not put it against the man if he trained Naruto to kill him. If he were to die, there would be less protection for Naruko, and it could very well lead to fulfilling the dark side of the prophecy. The best thing he could do was to keep Naruto under his thumb and make sure that he gained no improvement in any way. As for Danzo, the only reason he kept the man within the Elder Council is due to the service the man did in his time, and the old man has not done anything directly against him. Naruto was twitching in anticipation, with his finger taping on his crossed arms and his foot tapping the ground. He had to wait through all the fights that the previous students went through. Even his sister had already gone as she went up against Hinata. He could say that Hyuga girl did alright in the match, but Naruko just had more powerful techniques and countermeasures against Hinata's fighting style. The roster was random, so Naruto had no idea when he would go. He just wanted to fight so he could finally be done with this. He watched as another civilian match finished and he would have to give props to Kazuki. The guy used a shuriken as a block and injured his opponent's hand. That was the main factor that won him the match. These matches weren't just for taijutsu, these were meant to see how well you do in a fight in general. This meant that jutsu, weapons, and tactics were examined. He was confident in his abilities, but this was also the first time he would be fighting someone other than himself. Well, without having to throw the match, Iruka wrote down some notes about the performance of the two and smiled. Congratulations, you two, you both did splendid in your match. Saku, you need to be ready for the unexpected. Enemy shinobi aren't going to be as sportsmanlike when you are out in the field. With your scores from the written exam and how well you were able to do the academy jutsus. He gestured toward the table that had a set of headbands laid out in an orderly fashion. I am proud to say that you are now shinobi of Konoha. Please pick up your headband and wait on the side for your classmates. The kids nodded as they both moved to pick up their headbands. There were sets of headbands for the kids to pick. One was the standard blue cloth, another was black, one was with a short cloth meant for wrapping around arms or legs, one was with a longer cloth for belts or to just have a long tassel, and the last was the metal plate with cloth of the same size so it can be attached to another piece of clothing they shinobi would like. Once they got their pick, they moved over to their friends and waited for the whole thing to be over so they could celebrate with their families. Iruka nodded before he looked down at his clipboard and frowned at one of the names on it. Shifting his eyes over the clipboard, he saw Naruto waiting for his turn. He normally would have gotten the boy over with since previously, he would be matched up with Naruko. The girl, however, had already gone as it was suggested to them that the girl should have a tougher opponent so she could show off how well she was against a better student. Now the boy could be paired up with another student and it could potentially go either way. Not to mention that Naruto had shown that he was well versed in the academy jutsu, which they thought to be impossible. Now Iruka was worried that the boy might actually succeed. Mizuki was having similar thoughts as he was hoping that the setup would be the same as always with Naruko beating Naruto. But Naruko already went. He looked at the remaining students and most of them were civilians. He needed the brat to fail in this so that it would give him the chance he needed. He smirked to himself as he saw one of the top taijutsu fighters in the class. He wasn't the best, but he sure as hell was a cut above the rest. He looked up and called them up. Naruto Namikaze and Kiba Inuzuka, you two are up next. Wahoo! This is gonna be fun and easy. Kiba cheered as he jumped off the ground and made his way to the starting point. Halfway there, he picked up Akamaru from his head and put him on the ground. I'm not gonna need any help with this one, buddy, and I'm gonna have some fun with this one. Akamaru whined before he sat down and barked at his partner, accepting what Kiba said. Naruto looked at Kiba and figured he could deal with this. I at least know how he fights so I can work around it. I better make this work. He walked toward the starting point as he heard some of the other kids talk. Dead kid walking. 5 Rio says Kiba beats him within 4 minutes. 10 says it's within 3. Naruto didn't care about their little bets. He was gonna put on a show that will get him his headband and he can finally be done with it all. Naruko watched as her brother walked toward Kiba and called out. Try not to embarrass yourself out there. Naruto stopped mid-step when he heard his sister say that and his lips curled up in a silent growl. He took a breath and was able to calm himself down before he made it to his spot. Iruka looked at the two and nodded as he said, okay, just in case you didn't pay attention to what will be examined. This will evaluate your skills in taijutsu, combat prowess, and ability to adapt. You are allowed to use anything at your disposal, but I will intervene if it starts to get out of hand, understood? Kiba cracked his knuckles as he was ready to get this started. Naruto nodded as he didn't take his eyes off Kiba. Iruka saw that they heard him and finished up. Alright, make the unison sign before we begin. Naruto deadpanned at this little bit he forgot about but complied. He brought his hand up with his 2 fingers extended. Kiba shrugged as he did the same. The two made the sign before they took a step back. Iruka nodded before he brought his hand up and swung it downward. Begin. Kiba was the first to make a move as he charged at Naruto. Naruto shifted his foot back, brought his arms up, and waited for the first attack. He saw Kiba throw a punch to his face and moved his arm to block the hit. He winced when the fist hit his wrist but chose to ignore it as he had to block a haymaker. He shifted side to side as Kiba threw punch after punch at his face as if that was the only target that Naruto had on him. Naruto began to take steps back as he weaved back and forth from hits he could dodge and brought up his arms to block any that he couldn't. Kiba's fighting style was focused more on his fists and claw-like nails. He never uses his feet, so Naruto didn't have to worry about any kicks or leg sweeps. Everyone watched as Kiba assaulted Naruto with relentless vigor. All the while, the blonde did nothing but defend. Naruko was a little surprised that Naruto was able to defend against any of Kiba's attacks. She assumed that he would have already been hit enough to lose, yet, here he was prolonging the loss. She was still waiting for him to lose as she saw that he was already losing his footing and was hit in the face by Kiba. Naruto's head turned with the hit from Kiba but kept his defense up as he continued to block the attacks. But as time continued, 1 hit became 2, 2 became 5, and his defense was starting to falter. As another punch threw his head back, he used this as a way to counterattack as he brought his forehead forward and slammed it into Kiba's face. Arg! Kiba was stunned by the counter and held his head in pain from the attack. He growled as he thought that the dead last of the class should not have been able to do that. In retaliation, he glared at Naruto before he charged once more, this time throwing all his strength into his attacks. Naruto was unable to bring up his defense in time and was struck by every attack that Kiba threw. He tried to throw his own attacks and was able to get a few hits in, but Kiba seemed to have gone feral and brushed off the bruises. Kiba landed a solid uppercut into Naruto's solar plexus before he threw a hard punch into the side of Naruto's face. Naruto spun from the force of the hit before he stopped, facing Kiba, and fell face first at Kiba's feet. The other students cheered for Kiba for beating the dead last. Kiba was breathing heavily before he smirked at the fallen blonde. Iruka though was froing as Naruto had cleared the required time limit that allowed students to get a middling score. With the test score the blonde achieved in the written exam, and his performance in the jutsu portion, he had no other choice than to pass him. He was about to give a statement that said that they both passed, but Mizuki interrupted him. It looks like he is still conscious. This match is until one of you is unconscious or we say it is over. This match is still ongoing. He knew that he could call it off now, but he enjoyed seeing the blonde get beaten by the Inuzuka. Kiba looked at Naruto and couldn't help but chuckle. Damn, I did a number on ya. But I guess being the dead last it's only a given that you would eat dirt after I wail on you. Naruto was groaning as his face was scrunched up in pain after being assaulted by Kiba. Guess you ain't gonna be worth anything other than dirt. Instantly, his twitching stopped, and his wince disappeared, replaced with anger as he was getting tired of everyone looking down on him. Screw it. Cue comeback music, I chose the doom music. Naruto pushed himself off the ground before he was standing tall and gave a death glare to Kiba. Go to hell. He instantly threw a smoke bomb on the ground, causing a large plume of smoke to envelope the audience, Kiba, and himself. Kiba covered his face with his arms to guard from the smoke. What the hell? He tried to look around for any sign of Naruto but he was unable to see anything. He was about to sniff the air in order to track his scent but felt a fist bury into his stomach, halting that action. He hunched over in pain before another fist was brought up to his chin, one strong enough to throw him into the air. Before he could be sent flying, a hand grabbed his ankle and brought him back down, slamming into the ground. He coughed up some blood before something yanked him up by his jacket and he was suddenly assaulted by a flurry of punches that were throwing his head in every direction. Regaining his senses, he stepped back in order to get some room, but didn't expect something metallic to wrap around his neck and yank his head back. A foot slammed into his back, causing him to bend backward even more. He felt the thing around his neck slacken again before it pulled his head forward and down, right into Naruto's knee. The crack made Kiba realize that his nose was broken and he wouldn't be able to track down where Naruto was. He was relieved when the thing around his neck disappeared, but he didn't have much time to enjoy it as he felt his legs get sepped from under him. On reflex, he bent his arms back before gripping the ground and somersaulting away. Kiba was able to land a few feet away but was kicked in the side from behind. He swung his fist back, trying to hit Naruto but only felt air. "Where are you?" He didn't notice Naruto's face appearing over his left shoulder. "Here." Naruto smirked at the shock that came from Kiba as he grabbed the Inuzuka's throat, stifling any sound he could make, and pulled hard enough to get him off his feet. He then slammed Kiba into the ground. Kiba let out a yelp of pain as the force was much more than he thought the blonde could muster. He opened his eyes and saw Naruto pull out a set of kunai. What the hell? He shut his eyes as he saw Naruto bring them down. Meanwhile, the other students were wondering what was going on in the smokescreen. They were able to hear some fighting happening inside the smoke, but that was all. They knew the fight was still going as they could hear fists impacting flesh, but that was all. They were wondering if Naruto had made a comeback using the smokescreen, but they figured that Kiba would still have the upper hand since the Inuzuka could still use his enhanced olfactory sense to find the blonde. After a few minutes of not being able to see anything, Hinata chose to activate her dojutsu to see how the fight was going. Her gasp caught the attention of the others as they wondered what the girl saw. Naruko tapped Hinata's shoulder and asked, "What is it? What can you see?" Before Hinata could say anything, another student spoke up. "Hey, the smoke's clearing." Everyone looked at the smoke and saw that it was indeed thinning out. They saw a figure standing over another and they thought that it was Kiba standing over a beaten Naruto, but when it cleared, they were surprised to see that it was the opposite. Naruto was standing over a beaten Kiba, and Kiba was pinned to the ground by ninja wires that were held in place by some kunai. Naruto himself didn't even look injured. It was like the attacks he took earlier never happened. Naruto looked over to Iruka with a hard stare. "Are you gonna stand there or are you gonna call it?" Iruka frowned at the sight and he did not want to call the match. Kiba is still conscious and has yet to surrender. Naruto's frown deepened before he knelt down and brought out another kunai and brought it to Kiba's neck. He looked up at Iruka as Kiba leaned away from the kunai. "How about now?" Iruka was now glaring at Naruto at this action. Before he could say anything, he was interrupted. "Look, I'm just showing you that I won the match. He can't get up and I have him at my mercy. No matter how you see it, he lost." Iruka growled as his grip tightened on the clipboard. "Fine." Naruto took that as confirmation and he pulled his kunai away. He brought his hand to one of his kunai as he whispered out, "How's that for a beatdown?" This was a little jab toward Kiba, as the Inuzuka usually called the fights between Naruto and Naruko a one-sided beatdown. He yanked the kunai, causing the others to come out of the ground before he grabbed them midair. Figuring that he was finally done here, he walked over to the table that had the headbands to grab one and leave. Iruka called out at the boy, "Hey, wait, I didn't say. I know I did decently on the written exam. I was able to do all 3 academy jutsu, and I won the match. Is there a reason I shouldn't have graduated?" Iruka tried to think of anything that would help him, but he was unable to do so. Naruto smirked at the teacher before he grabbed a headband that had long black cloth before he began to walk away from the others. "I'm finally done with this place. Now I can start with the other place." Mizuki was gritting his teeth so hard that one could hear them crack. Shit. That little shit wasn't supposed to graduate. He was glaring daggers at Naruto's back and was wishing he could attack the boy right here and now, but he couldn't. His mind went over to how he could be able to get the scroll till he came up with a good workaround. You'll get yours soon, you brat. The students were also shocked at the sight of Naruto winning the match. A majority of them didn't think he would be able to graduate, while the remaining didn't care about it. The one who was shocked the most was Naruko. She watched her brother leave but still couldn't figure it out. How did he win? She had been fighting him all this time and not once had he ever shown the skill that would be able to win against Kiba. She wanted to go after him and ask what he did, but Ino asked her a question. He must have used the smokescreen in order to do something to win. You got any idea what he did, Naruko? Naruko looked to Ino before shrugging. No, but he must have done something underhanded in order to win. He never had that kind of skill, so it doesn't make any sense. Her mind kept thinking about the fight and she was now determined to figure out how he was able to beat Kiba, one of the best fighters in the class. Not the best but still pretty good. Naruko wasn't the only one who was curious about it as the Anbu watched the boy leave. Smokescreen hid his moves and tactics, but it is clear that he is far better than what we know. I should begin writing my report for the Hokage so he can read it tomorrow. The Anbu jumped away to follow the boy and keep track of this new development. Kiba had gotten up and was wiping his face with his sleeve to get some of the blood off him. Akamaru was at his feet, rubbing his head on his partner's leg in concern. Kiba looked at his partner and gave a crooked smile. I'm fine, pal, he just got me by surprise. He brought his hand up to his neck and rubbed it. The hell did he use around my neck? Felt like a damn chain, but he doesn't have anything like that on him. He moved to the table to get his own headband as he was told he graduated. I'll beat him next time. Later, Naruto was in his room as he held the headband in his hand. He finally got this piece of metal that granted him privileges that were held from him. He still knew that things would be difficult for him as his father most likely would do something to hinder him, but right now, this piece of metal will be just what he needs to go with the next part of what he had planned when he did graduate. He was also going to remember the look of fury on Iruka and Mizuki's faces from now on. He looked out his window when he sensed Naruko's chakra approaching. He frowned as he had a feeling that she might bring up the fact that he beat Kiba to his parents. He was sure that they didn't know just yet since neither Minato nor Kushina had interrogated him yet. The two adults were downstairs as they were excited to hear Naruko brag about graduating. Naruto figured that they assumed that he failed as he only walked in and headed to his room. He made sure to hide the headband in his jacket to keep this from them. He heard the door open and there was a cheer from the two adults. Congratulations on graduating. Naruko smiled as she jumped into her parents' arms as she saw the sign above them that said congratulations. The three laughed at this happy moment with confetti floating around them. Minato and Kushina let their daughter go as they looked at the headband she had on her forehead. Minato ruffled her hair with a proud smile on his face. I knew you would be able to do it. Now you have the chance to get even stronger when you get your Jonin sensei. Kushina nodded before she gave Minato a hard look. You better make sure that he is on time on the day or else I will drag him in the dirt to the academy so he is on time. Minato chuckled sheepishly as he knew about Kakashi's acquired habit. I'll make sure. Naruko giggled as she already knew about Kakashi's tendencies and was almost looking forward to seeing her mother drag the man into the classroom before being tossed in. Her mind then went to the other member of the family and she was curious to ask if her parents had trained Naruto in any way for the graduation exam. Despite how that was unlikely since they had trained her all the time they could have made a shadow clone in order to train him. Hey, guys. Kushina clapped her hands as she remembered what they were supposed to do when Naruko came back from the academy. The girl may have arrived later than they would have thought she would, but she was here and the matriarch was excited to give the girl the surprise. Oh, that's right, we had a surprise for you when you came back. Naruko paused at that and remembered that her parents had told her that they would give her a surprise when she came back. Her apprehension slowly dissipated and she felt excitement take over as she was eager to get her surprise. Ooh, what is it? She began to bounce around as she really wanted to know what it was. Minato chuckled at how happy his daughter was acting. He placed his hand on her shoulder to get her to hold still. Easy, we can't tell you if you are too excited to hear us. Naruko nodded as she looked at her parents expectantly. Kushina smiled brightly as she knelt down to look her daughter in the eye. Naruko, how would you feel about having a little sister? Naruko's world froze as her mind tried to register what she had just heard. It took her a few seconds before the gears clicked back into place and the question repeated in her mind. Her look of frozen shock slowly became a big grin. Are you serious? Kushina smiled as she stood up and did a hand sign that dispelled a hinge she was in. It was revealed that she was already showing. Kushina let out a sigh of relief as she leaned on her husband. I can finally stop hiding it. She had been hiding this as a way to give her daughter a surprise for her graduation. The idea of hiding was her idea, and she was sure that the look of shock was something she was going to remember for some time. Not to mention that Minato had a camera in his hand that he used to take a picture of Naruko's shock. What the three below didn't notice was the crash that was heard upstairs. Naruto had tripped on his own feet when he heard what was said down below. He laid on the ground looking up at the ceiling with a dumbfounded expression. What the hell? He couldn't believe that his mother was pregnant with another kid. A little sister. How the hell was he supposed to react to that? He stayed on the ground for a few minutes as he thought of the idea of having a little sister. He then sat up and took a breath as he determined to himself. This changes nothing. He stood up, moved to sit on his bed, and looked out the window. Not like my life will get any better with a little sister coming. He sighed as he knew that his plans would continue. He had nothing against the coming baby, he just had plans for his future that he couldn't stop for anything. Maybe she won't be like the rest of my family. That thought made him smile, but it dropped when his senses picked up someone approaching, fast. Back downstairs, Naruko was pressing her ear to Kushina's belly as if she would be able to hear the baby. Kushina giggled at how her daughter thought she could hear anything. She patted Naruko's head. You won't be able to hear anything yet, Databane. Shish. I can hear something. Naruko continued to listen for anything but was having a hard time doing so. Minato chuckled at that and was about to say something till Lord Hokage, an Anbu landed inside the room unannounced and knelt down in front of his commander. Minato frowned at this break in protocol, but his mind went to how this would only happen if something urgent happened. What is it? The Anbu lifted his head to look at the man. I am sorry to disturb you, but you must hear this. Well, the Anbu paused for a moment before giving the news. Naruto Namikaze has stolen the sacred scroll from your office. There was a pause from all three of the Namikaze family till the patriarch spoke up. What? He turned his head toward the stairs before he ran toward them, with his daughter following. Once he was on the second floor, he jumped across the hall to land in front of Naruto's door before he burst into the room. When he went inside, he saw that the room was empty with the window open. He grit his teeth before he turned around and ran back downstairs. He spoke to the Anbu in an authoritative voice. Gather all the Anbu, Jonin, and Chunin. They are to find Naruto and retrieve the scroll immediately. He and the Anbu disappeared from the room as they now had to find and subdue Naruto. Naruko was looking out the window as she frowned at how Naruto had done something like this. Her eyes scanned the rooftops she could see but saw nothing. Clenching her fists, she jumped out the window to find her brother. What the hell are you doing, Naruto? Naruto was roof hopping, avoiding any sign of shinobi around. He was not going to be caught, not now. He had something to do and he was going to do it. End of chapter. Reviews Corner. God of Wind 200. Review. For Naruto's pairing, I say Ayame is a good one. But if she needs to be a ninja, then Mabui from Cloud Village. Response. Ayame is a possibility, but I am not sure about that. As for anyone outside of the village, I am unsure. Haven't thought about that just yet as things are just getting started. Jorge Lucio Contreras. Review. Has K Naruto, Use el estilo de pelea de Scorpion contra Naruko y Haga este Jutsu Ninpo. K's. Daya Hurricane Arte Ninja. Viento. Gran Huracan Asesino. Me, lo inventé yo mismo y en party has que Naruto le pegue una patada en las bolas a Jiraiya y Kakashi le queman sus libros Ika Ika. Response. I'll think about it as I have some plans for what Naruto would do to Jiraiya. Thick Chung's. Review. Will you have it where Naruto moves out and into an apartment as well as denounces his heritage? It's an early start at the moment, but I can't wait to read more. Response. I am heavily considering that. There is something I plan on having done before that, but it might lead to that at one point in the future. Danny LaFou. Review. Oh yeah, treat your son like trash and expect him not to resent you. How could that go wrong? Hopefully Tsunade will try to punch some sense into the idiots, alas it won't work, being this kind of story. Also, whenever someone talks about a prophecy, in any setting, I'm reminded of a wise old dragon. Those who try to hasten the end, may delay it. Those who work to delay the end, may bring it closer. Because once again, this is probably what's happening here. Response. I actually hadn't thought of Tsunade and where she would stand in this. But having her not be with the whole thing is a big possibility, as she doesn't seem like the type to follow that kind of thing. Also, I like that saying. Unsen Musho. Review. I wonder if there's a small chance for Naruko to be on Naruto's side in the future. I mean, if you're set on Minato and Kushina being completely in the wrong in this FIC, it would make things even sweeter when the child they put their money on basically sided with the child they shunned for dumb reasons. I also can't wait to see when karma comes knocking on their door in the future. I'm also glad that there are still people on his side in Konoha, even if it's a very few. Response. That would be spoiling things. And that would be sweet karma. KY111. Review. Great chapter. I wonder if Naruto will move out once he graduates. Once he's able to do a steady stream of D-rank missions, he could probably afford a crappy apartment. Might be worth his while to get out of his parents' house and perhaps give himself a chance to slip to the background and away from his parents' prying eyes. No doubt Minato would still keep him under some kind of watch. He may even be for it to isolate Naruto away from Naruko. Until the next one. Response. That would be spoiling if I said anything. Ruslan Daida. Review. Irony. I read some comments and specifically this explanation to justify my idea of uniting Naruto. For example, with Kuratsuchi, I have no complaints about her. And in general, reading works with her is quite interesting. And you don't care that in this case, Naruto betrays the Uzumaki. Their memory. Maybe Kushina is not the best mother in history. Betrayed the principal of her clan. However, how will Naruto be different then? If he starts messing with the murderers of his distant family? Response. Not sure about the pairing. As for betraying, that depends on perspective, but this Naruto has plans for his future. Equinox Hun. Review. I hope you EILL keep updating this FIC, and actually finish it. Response. I plan to finish all of my stories. I know I have a lot of unfinished ones, but I guarantee that I will finish them. It will just take some time. Stefan as. Review. Minato and Jiraiya annoy me by talking about peace when with their position they could have done something. Response. Not sure if that is a good thing that I wrote them to be as such. They are not meant to be the good guys this time. Edric Twilight Legend. Review. This really has me hooked in now. I'm glad to see Naruto hold his defiance and train himself, looking damn forward to that victory for Naruto against his sister, his leaving of those strangers in all but blood. Let me tell you right now that you are truly an amazing writer and don't let anyone tell you different. Response. Glad you like it and sorry for the late update. Had a few other things taking up my time. Thanks. I really needed to read that. Mahuka 9. Review. That was a good chapter. Now we showed why Minato and Kushina are like that. I think Kushina won't be forgiven if she wants to kill Naruto to keep Naruko alive. I think Naruto has to hear this and then decide to leave the village forever. I think get together with OC character like maybe Genshin Raiden or something. I'm looking forward to reading more. Response. Glad you liked it. I try not to bring in characters from other series unless it is a crossover. For pairing, I don't know who it will be if any. Spark 681. Review. A nice story so far, can't wait till Naruto is ready to claim his freedom anyways, keep up the great work. Response. Sorry for the wait. Hope you like the chapter. Lighting Abyss. Review. I like the story so far, I just find it. I would say try having Naruto be friends with someone, then either have that person killed or overhear it being part of a mission that person is his friend. Response. Glad you like it. That would push him over the edge. Maybe. Nathair 1. Review. This is a fantastic chapter. Here are the errors I found in this chapter. Taijutsu is slopping. Should be. Taijutsu is sloppy. Naruko blacked the kunai. Should be. Naruko blocked the kunai. Eager to see the reactions of his family and everyone else when he finally reveals his skills and calls Kushina and Minato out on being a bunch of complete hypocrites. After all, the Uzumaki Namikaze family are a shinobi family, and they essentially want a member of their family to be killed by refusing to allow him train. Perhaps Kurama could be introduced within the next couple of chapters. If you want, I could PM you a list of potential lovers for Naruto. Response. Thanks for the heads up. We can discuss it in the Discord. Lightblade 1121. Review. I had a feeling that Naruto was holding back, to not show any suspicions. Classic scenario in showing off what he can really do. Also, the adults are idiots for thinking Naruto is the bad guy. They're even worse for thinking the best way to handle it is to shun him. Hope they get what they deserve. Response. Deception is a shinobi's weapon. And they just might. Rated N 777. Review. So will they eventually realize what they did was wrong, but Naruto will not accept them back as family? Response. Yes. Jägermeister 31. Review. Well, that was another nice chapter. Most of the village needs to just get slaughtered, nobody would really care, in my opinion they're just husks anyway. Quite amusing that Naruto uses a henge as Naruko for most of the story. It does seem that Ino isn't as hateful towards Naruto, but maybe it's just her being curious. I am curious though, you said next chapter Naruto will show some of his skills, won't he get questioned on that? Not that it matters much, I look forward to it. Response. I have a workaround for how he shows off, but you'll have to read to find out. Manga 154. Review. Thank the gods the ramen duo are still good people. I am absolutely loving how painfully obvious it is that the bastard parents are heading for a Greek tragedy with this prophecy, with no one more powerful than the three fools to smack them out of their stupidity and kick them out of this, for lack of better term, zealotry. But Minato has put all his wants for a father onto the master pervert, so he's going to follow along and take that knife to the hilt for Jiraiya's mistakes and arrogance. Still loving this story and can't wait for more. Response. I couldn't make them bad. The ramen duo are my favorite characters in the series and it just felt wrong. Samuel Santillan. Review. I like it. Good chapter. I definitely agree. This story is very interesting. Naruto is undoubtedly very skilled, having devised a way to train without them realizing it. Without a doubt, in that village everyone is stupid, starting with Minato and Kushina. They have forgotten that the greatest tool of a ninja is deception, but it was to be expected. After all, they don't know his son and they never tried to get to know him. Have you ever seen the Kengan Ashura manga or anime? I hope so. I thought about how Naruto created his own version of Rasengan, but without chakra, only taijutsu. That way they wouldn't be able to find out that Naruto has a deadly technique, since they wouldn't be able to sense his chakra since the technique wouldn't require it. I thought about using the palm of the demon from Kengan Ashura. That technique is powerful, deadly, and requires strong control of arm and wrist rotation. It could be used as a basis for a version of Rasengan for Naruto. Have you not thought about Naruto x Naruko that over time the feelings of animosity of both will transform into love? It's just a recommendation. If you don't like it, you could pair Naruto with Anko and Yakumo. You could continue with an extra team in the tournament. Response. Interesting way to use the jutsu without it being the jutsu, maybe. As for Naruto and Naruko, no, I haven't thought about it. I haven't thought about the pairing much in this one. As for extra team in the tournament, I actually already wrote down many fights that I wanted to see in that FIC, I just got stumped on the in-between stuff. I know a lot of people want me to return to it, and I just got sidetracked by a lot of new stories that came out of my head, too many in my opinion, and it just happened. I will come back to it, it just took a step back since there was little story to it. Courtney Uzu Yato. Review. Oh, they're going to suffer for following a miserable prophecy. Prophecies shouldn't be followed as they are sparse and the universe will shape itself around it to bring it to fruition. If Jiraiya kept his damn mouth shut and just solved any problem between them, it would have just faded. Instead, he just kick-started it by having Naruto resent Konoha and his family, especially his sister, and they'll have no one to blame but themselves when they find her head in his hand. But, let's see how this will go, I can't wait for it. Keep up the great work. Response. In trying to avoid it, they may very well bring it about. Glad you like the story. Redlocks 2. Review. This is an interesting neglect story, although I will admit I don't quite get the neglect from the village itself. Is there some rumor that Naruto is like the Kyuubi reborn like other stories, or do they simply think he is a screw-up compared to his more talented sister, so it's simply easier to make him out to be a joke rather than a pariah? Response. I actually have a bit of an explanation to it in this chapter. I hope it works as I am unsure of it myself. Midnight Lost. Review. Very good job on this chapter. Really closing the gap on whether or not Kushina and Naruko can redeem themselves and repair their relationship with Naruto, especially with Kushina. Naruko I still see as a victim of her circumstance and not questioning her parents. Really looking forward to the next chapter. Response. Glad you like it and we will see about those two. D. Review. Pair Naruto and Naruko please. Response. Maybe. Guest 1. Review. Good start, enjoying this. My only complaint is your choice to use the name Naruko and not another name. I get that it's a canon name, but it's way too close to Naruto's to use in a FIC where he is in and not be referring to the sexy jutsu. It's better to use something like Mito or Narumi or something original to stop the reader getting confused, or even you the author, which I've seen happen a lot of the times the two names are used. Response. I know the name is overused but have a reason for it. It will be revealed later on. Guest 2. Review. The way Naruto is being treated, hopefully he doesn't forgive his parents at all. Also, apart from Ichiraku, he doesn't have anything keeping him at Konoha. Response. Precisely. Guest 3. Review. 10 out of 10. Response. Thank you. Volkasiran 30. Review. Yeah, they just started up self-made prophecy just by treating Naruto like that instead of Naruto like some criminal. They could least treated both children as equal, instead they just made the situation worse. It would be really messed up if he just leaves years later when the village or the elemental nation is in trouble. And only to find out Naruto was supposed to help his sister with the prophecy, only for him no longer caring about anybody in the elemental nation. They can beg and plead forgiveness, but Naruto just done with them for all the crap they put him through. Is really amazing that he has a snapped or at least gum left the village and handed out village secrets, like handed the flying thunder god technique and the Rasengan to their enemies. For potential lover for Naruto, how about a female Haku? Response. That's kind of how most prophecies go. As for the pairing, I could do that. DD 780. Review. Good chapter. It's nice to see he still has a prankster side to him. Response. I felt that he should keep that in him. Hajik Safari. Review. Trying to prevent a prophesied event, and you would inevitably kickstart it. As always with people who tried to divert it, as their action were the cause for it to happen. Response. That is how it always is for prophecies. Ryu Wolf. Review. Nice chapter. Response. Thank you. Atsuc 101. Review. I can't wait to see Naruto pull out a scorpion's, get over here, with a chakra. Kunai in chains from his hand in a fight between his ex-parents and Naruko before he leaves the village to go out on his own after he denounced his Namikaze name and expels Kushina from the Uzumaki clan for how she treated her family, Naruto himself, with the act triggering a hidden blood seal made by the Uzumaki sealmasters to excommunicate badbloods, those how have dishonored the clan, from the clan, taking her ability to create and use chakra chains. Response. I could have a moment like that with Naruto and Naruko, but we will see. Corpse Candle. Review. Naruto is practicing an important part of being a shinobi, and that is deception, which he is forced to do inside his own village if he wants to learn anything or do any kind of training for self-improvement. It would be best for him to barely pass if he is going to graduate, making it look like a fluke that he passed, though failing purposely and escaping the village while the family is celebrating Naruko's graduation would be easy, as he just has to pretend to be disappointed or upset that he didn't pass and hole himself in his room and leave a clone for a couple days as he escapes. Alternatively, he could pass and the instructors fail him purposely despite getting a passing score that could be the last straw if he is going to leave or stay. It would be interesting to see how things turn out. If he stays, he will have to constantly deceive everyone, hiding his growth until he chooses to reveal his abilities, possibly at the Chunin exams. I like him succeeding in the things his sister was unable to do, as it would be a slap to the face to his parents when it is finally discovered, as they never trained him in such things. Response. Naruto has to improve in one way, and when left to his own, he can be creative. Read the chapter to see how things progress. Guest 4. Review. Wonder what Naruto's plans are for the future. Response. That will be revealed as we keep going. Sniperbro 1998. Review. Minato and Kushina are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy with their actions. Response. That's how it usually is when trying to go against a prophecy. Patriot M89. Review. Though I don't agree with the full-on shunning and treating him like a criminal because Jiraiya had to open his big mouth, I like how you managed to make this believable. Also, love the panty incident in Naruto's, thanks to the librarian. And, if you're still open to suggestions on who Naruto should be with, Shizuka, Sasama Fuma, or even Isaribi, those girls barely get any love. Response. I was worried that I was doing a poor job of making it believable. Glad you think I am doing a good job. As for the pairing, I will take those into consideration. Skull Flame. Review. This keeps getting better and better. I like your spin so far. Response. Thank you. Glad you like it. Zipzapdoo-whoop. Review. What a clever chapter. I applaud you. I've done some thinking about what you mentioned last chapter. About how you want to explain Kushina and Minato's behavior, but still make it clear that they aren't good people. I think I have the perfect solution. I am studying medicine, and in the process, I have taken many psychology classes. One of the most fascinating concepts is the concept of narcissism. Narcissism is both a personality trait as well as a psychological condition. And based on what I've learned, I think it'd be perfect if Minato and Kushina were both narcissists. One of the most worrying things about narcissists is the damage they can do to a significant other and their family. When a narcissist has children, plural, children, it is very common for them to show blatant favoritism to one child over another. In fact, it's really rare that they don't show some form of favoritism to one of their children. In the process, they reject and neglect their other children so they can dedicate their attention to their favorite. The reason why this happens is that a narcissistic parent will always show favoritism to the child they most identify with, or the one they believe is most like them. In the context of your story, you can see it as Kushina subconsciously shows Naruko favoritism as her personality is almost identical to hers. The second reason why a narcissistic parent chooses a favorite over another is that if there is a situation where they cannot identify much with any child, they will instead reject the child they believe is most flawed, or that they think worst reflects them as a person. In the context of the story, you could say that Minato would reject Naruto and not Naruko. This is because even though they are both flawed, the prophecy alludes that Naruko is destined for greatness. So to Minato, this perceived destiny would far outweigh any flaws Naruko might or might not have. And just to clarify, despite their atrocious behavior and blatant negligence to their rejected child, in most cases, narcissists insist that they do love their rejected child, and that their actions are justified and is actually their own unique form of love. This, to me, sounds exactly like what's happening in your story. What's interesting is the way the favorite child develops as they enter adulthood. Half the time, that favorite child will indeed follow the example of their parents and grow up to be narcissists themselves. However, the other half of the time, that favorite child will start to realize the damage of their parents' actions. And once they realize that, they almost always reject their parents' ideology and begin resenting them. Usually, they try to make amends, but growing up following the example of narcissists is guaranteed to make any child innately selfish. So, it's up in the air what you should do with Naruko. And since you implied that you don't want Naruto to forgive his parents, you could make a storyline later where Naruto is considering forgiving his parents, but something happens that reveals their true nature. As Naruto grows up, he considers what his life would have been like if there was no prophecy. If maybe his life could have been better, and if they could have been a true family. The Naruto Road to Ninja movie introduces the idea of the limited Tsukuyomi, in where Naruto is trapped in a genjutsu of another world where his parents are still alive. You could canonize the movie and make it so that there is no genjutsu, and instead, he really goes to an alternate timeline. In it, there is no prophecy. But despite that, his parents still end up rejecting one of their children. But instead of Naruto, it's Naruko. His parents were always going to reject one of their children, no matter what. It reveals to him their true nature. The only thing the prophecy did was make the decision for them, and it also took away any accountability. It gave them an excuse for their actions. A narcissist's favorite thing is an excuse. They will always take any chance to deny accountability over their own bad behavior. And the only thing the prophecy would do is give them the perfect excuse. That's what I think you should do. Of course, you are the author, so you have the final say. I just think it'd be interesting to introduce a real-world psychological perspective to the situation. Response: I think you just broke down what I planned on doing with their behavior. For the Tsukuyomi, an interesting idea, not sure how and when I could do it, but I'll make a note of it. Kryo Yaroi. Review. I'm just waiting for the good round where he opens a big can of whoop on Naruko and then leaves them as a whole. Response: it will come, but it's gotta have a build up to it. Gold Testament. Review. Really looking forward to how far this goes. Been a while since I read a good neglect fic. Response: glad you like it. Guest 5. Review. How much of canon are you planning to bring into your fanfic? If you decide to keep Naruto as the reincarnation of Ashura and Sasuke as the reincarnation of Indra, will you make the Chunin exams be where Minato and or Kushina meet their end fighting Orochimaru? Response: I have no plans for the reincarnation aspect from the show, and as for the death of them in the Chunin exams, I don't think so, since it would most likely end the FIC around there. Hate us. Review. I want to see them suffering. Response: okay. JH831. Review. Kind of going overboard on the Naruto neglect and abuse, don't you think? Not sure why Naruto doesn't just up and leave. Hope you don't have Naruto hold back during the exams and destroys everyone. Response: it's my first time writing a neglect FIC, so I may get some things wrong or go overboard. Umbra on Shadow. Review. I really like these story you've made so far. I enjoyed it all, led to this a lot and wanted a continuation, so I am enjoying this. I think Naruto should be trained by Kabuto in secret because he still will need a master for higher level skills. Scrolls can only do so much. But his sensei can't be someone loyal to the village. He's stated to be equal to Kakashi and is a medic nin, so if Naruto's going to learn the mystic palm and other medic jutsu, that should be a fit. Response. That is a possibility, though he isn't aiming to be a medic nin, he just figured that learning some medic ninjutsu would help him out. Guest 6. Review. Stupid story. I can't stop reading it XD. There are some things that are quite concerning. Main being, the so-called love Minato and Kushina have for Naruko. Let's get real, if it was the other way around, the roles would be reversed. There is proof of that when Minato and Jiraiya talk. They talk about how Naruto could stop her sister bringing the peace they want. This tells me that they only see her as a tool for that. I wonder if there is another ninja that sees people as tools. Rubs chin. Another concerning fact is that Kushina thinks that Naruto will kill her sister. However, will that really happen? Stand between can mean anything. Death, possible, but not definite. Prophecies, in my opinion, are hard to read or interpret. It's better to go with the flow. Trying to stop them can bring forth the worst scenario possible. In this fixed case, can it be assured that the Kyuubi is the burden? It's possible, but burden could be anything. After all, the hatred and contempt of the village is quite the burden as well. In any case, I'm curious about which direction this will go. Response. Got me worried on those first two words, lol. Prophecy readings is difficult to do as they can be interpreted in many different ways. Child of Dreams. Review. Considering how they treat him, do they even see Naruto as their son? Response. I wonder. Jamaican Printessa. Review. I love this story so much, I can't wait for you to update _ Response. I'm sorry for the delay, some things took up my time. Plainer Walking Entertainment. Review. Stumbled upon this, find it rather interesting. Will watch for further updates. Shouldn't they be more worried over how they are actually making the prophecy come true in a self-fulfilling way? They are shunning him and cracking down on him while his sister is being spoiled by them. That normally builds bad feels, especially might lead in line with the prophecy. Response. They don't realize that they are pushing it toward a path. Suggestions. Reviews. Naruto heading towards Iwagakure or Kumagakure or both teams save Naruto from Konoha. Kushina and Minato went into Naruto's bedroom. They saw darts boards with each other parents, Naruto's and Jiraiya pictures pinned to those darts boards. Punching bags with the same things. I'll kill everyone of this family members and Jiraiya. Naruto told Jiraiya, I'm the not one that stopped her. My goal is to kill you. Naruto told Kushina you are no Uzumaki at all. Naruto finds a dimensional portal. The same masked man and entrained by other visions of his parents and others. Response. This is a gray Naruto, not dark. And I am assuming you mean Obito, who takes him to Tsukiyomi and trained by other dimension parents. Guest 7. Review. Yes, 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 very original. Can you do something actually original now? Response. Yeah, I can, but as this is the first time I am doing a neglect fic, it's not the best. If you want to be rude, then make your own version that is original. Omega Delta. Review. Wonder what Naruto has planned, and will he stay in the leaf? Also, will Naruto have summons, and if so, which one, or are you taking suggestions? Keep up the good work.